The fierce confrontation between the Lord Demons and mankind, which lasted for centuries and costs the human race not one life, must finally end. The long-awaited liberation promises people peace and relief. That's where the goddess appears, a hero designed to stop the villain that has been horror in the hearts of people for years. With his arrival, the battle should end, because he was destined to defeat the King of Demons. In the midst of the battle with the demonic owner, the closest associates who stood away and sought at least the slightest opportunity to help El desperately sounded at him. Exhausted to the edge, they warned that the forces were about to betray them, and urged them to retreat urgently, so as not to be destroyed. A short Hay-girl broke out on a cry, pleading for him not to sacrifice himself under any circumstances, even if they have to retreat. Hearing the voice of his comrades, the young man looked over his shoulder and called them that the rest of the battle is now on his shoulders, so let them run faster. Having announced her friend about her departure, the girl spread her hands wide and used the spell of teleportation. Looking back to the owner of the demons, the girl firmly stated that it was time to put the land. When the demonic lord rushed into the attack, she desperately turned to the goddess, begging for her protection for the elect. Having lifted his eyelids after the battle, Ella first met with a complete darkness opposite. The sharp angry of the curse broke from his mouth, and he instantly imposed a spell of light. Barely the space around filled a soft shine. A whole mountain of skeletons appeared around him. Fear and a deafening cry escaped from the guy as soon as the awareness came to him. Seeing the skeletons, Ella guessed. They were underground, so such a spooky darkness reigns. Do not prove the fate to stay here and suffocate alive. The obsessive thought of escape persecuted him. Raising his palm, the sorcerer activated the spell of teleportation, a powerful outbreak to the moment the gloomy dungeon was illuminated, after which the Aqua disappeared into the air. In a moment, the space around him changed, and the hero sank smoothly to the ground elsewhere. When I dropped his eye around, he realized. Everything in this place was transformed into ruins through a crazy duel with the owner of the demons. With his hand, confidently, Ella removed his helmet from the armor and pulled it out of his head. Carefully placing the helmet on the ground under his feet, he straightened his back and shakes his hair with a light movement, gracefully shaking it. Having gained his gaze to one point, the young man said with relief, "Finally, the demonic lord was overcome, and humanity is saved from death." Realizing the grandeur of this victory, full of gratitude, he decided to pay tribute to the goddess, to whom he once addressed the prayer for protection. Suddenly, the sword in the hands of Ella flashed a bright glow. The young man lowered his head, seeking to understand what was happening. Meanwhile, the light that broke out of the blade was rapidly increasing and swirling into a dazzling vortex. The blizzard of energy unfolded rapidly, completely reaching, but also rising up. From the very center of the swinging vortex appeared an extremely beautiful woman. Like a dawn, she led under the ceiling, calmly closed her eyes. The goddess appeared in front of him. El's gaze rose up to the goddess, who intentionally came down to him. Her eyes glowed with a soft smile full of tenderness. The goddess turned to the protagonist by the name, Noel, by saying in a full voice, as sincerely rejoices that the young man is still alive. The goddess confessed that her power did not reach the possessions of the owners of demons. So while Noel lay unconscious under the rubble, she had no certainty about his fate. Having gone down to Noel, she unexpectedly confessed. The young man did not come to her senses for 6 months, and her heart was full of anxiety for him. It was thanks to the words of the goddess about the long-lasting hope of Elhanan, as if hearing this call woke up the next day. The sudden thought of how much could happen during this time made him shudder. In an alarming impulse, he broke out of his place, exclaimed, "It just couldn't be!" The sudden outbreak of the illumination was pierced by Noel. Images of his friends floated in memory. The excitement increased as the heart squeezed anxiety for his comrades. Escalade, the young man turned to the goddess, eagerly asking for their fate. Lowering her head, the goddess said quietly that Allah was all right with his friends, but the shade of regret flashed on her face. El's relief swept when news about the safety of friends came. A sincere smile illuminated his face. After leaning his eyelids, he thanked the goddess passionately for the salvation of his loved ones. And suddenly, the thin hand of the goddess stretches to his cheek, forcing Noel to open his eyes wide with surprise. Suddenly the phrase came. Although Ali's comrades are trusting, the young man's world cannot be called safe. The goddess's hand froze in the air. not touching Hell's face, and the guy himself, as if fans, looked at her stunningly, losing the gift of language. The goddess said that the kingdom of Noel, Lavania, declared the winner of the Dark Lord of Prince Cain Lavain. He smiled widely in the evaporation, easily accepting the glory he did not really gain. Hearing this news, Noel asked how the prince could declare the winner. The young man thoughtfully scratched Jim and said that all the members of the detachment returned, so this news seemed surprisingly strange. Having collected the remnants of courage, the goddess closed her eyes and strictly informed that at the behest of the crown, Noel's friends from now on, as if he had never participated in that battle. This is exactly how Alex has argued in the last days. The goddess said that, forgetting the glorious victory of Noel, Aqua became a court wizard and humbly bowed her knees in front of the king. When the goddess ended the news, the voice led her further. It turned out that that night, Guvadal forgot about Noel and received a gorgeous mansion in the capital, supplemented with a whole harem of charming beauties. Stella lost her memory of her girlfriend and collapsed with a self-esteem hero who deceived everyone, claiming that he defeated the owner of the demons of Cain Lavanius. After completing this news that stunned Noel, the goddess noticed is a significant reward for positions that gained respect throughout the kingdom. Raising his head, El noted that such reward in response sounds extremely strange, because it is only a ward. Folding in place, he looked at the goddess with surprise. His face was distorted by the wrinkle of distrust when it came to him. Now Stella was engaged. In the lowered eyes, the goddess reflected repentance. She sadly confirmed the worst assumptions. Suddenly grabbing her head, Elle wondered how and when Stella had time to do it. It was a real shock. This news knocked out the soil from under his feet. After all, getting to know the girl from an early age, when she had fun and played with him, to put up with the fact that Stella was engaged, Noel could still. But after learning that her bridegroom, Prince Cain himself from Levin, did not find a place of astonishment. At this point, the goddess successfully distracted Egil from his reflections, proposing to finally reveal the true cause of the imperial decree, which everyone was ordered to remain silent about the identity of a true hero. Noel lifted his head in surprise and listened carefully to every word that the goddess proclaimed. The goddess assured that the hero, who overcame the owner of the demons, became the last hope of salvation. However, he should die. Not only the kingdom will all plunge into sadness and chaos, but the whole human race will be on the verge of despair. The goddess said that a flag of hope, embodied in the form of a hero, is intended to give a ray of hope for those who have been tired of endless years of bloodshed. A moment when the goddess cut off her story, Noel was surprisingly caught. The palm of the hand touched the chin, and a shadow of confusion appeared on his face. It was difficult to put up with how easily found him a replacement. The goddess's eyes were filled with guilt. She looked away, acknowledging. The emperor who issued this decree sought only to keep peace in the state. At the same moment, Elskipal clenched the sword's sleeve even more, and the tension in the air increased. The sudden gust of energy forced him to straighten and exclaim, "Life returned, and therefore time to turn everything upside down." However, the goddess mercilessly scattered his hope. Even if Noel appears again in the kingdom, the true essence of the hero will remain hidden for all. The last spark of hope faded, leaving Noel alone with acute pain in the soul. The awareness came unexpectedly. He sighed quietly and lowered his head, confusing that nothing now returned, and the former remained in the past. The goddess tried to reassure him, explaining that the real hero had to be hidden in order not to give Lord Demons to return to this world. However, the king himself had his own motives. The goddess confessed that even in the boldest predictions, she did not imagine that the events would unfold this way. Lowering her head, the goddess with anxiety noticed that something is extremely strange. For a long time the king lived with a shadow of suspicion of heart. The fidgety still remained wary, so it was the difficult situation. On the majestic throne, rising above the subjects, the king with a glowing smile proclaimed that everything was just wonderful, because the glorious characters came from his kingdom. Having glared with the gaze of Noel, who was in love with his knees, the king turned to Tom with the hope that he would continue to fulfill his duty. From that moment, the difficult way began for him. Everything for the protection of the people and his country. The memories of this were baked by Ella from the inside. What would happen if it were not for his intervention, if he had not been able to overcome the demons? Now, everything that Noel fought for got to another, to those who are not worth it. The goddess leaned to the young man, carefully took his face in her palms, and gently pulled out of captivity. Her insightful look focused on Butt, and a gentle voice asked what he would do next. Snatering his head, he confessed in a heavy voice. In fact, he has no idea what he wants and what he would do next. Lifting his gaze, he barely smiled, and added that he was not going to calm down. His peaceful life does not attract him at all. To begin with, Noel returned home, thinking about the future. At home, he carefully put all his things to his backpack, shaking from the excitement, throwing him on his shoulders, and, without looking back, left the house. Finally, Bagada expressed her sincere gratitude for the salvation of their world from the Master of Demons, and wished good luck in the future. Leaving the forest, El went to the city where he was met by a famous guard at the very entrance. Once inside the city walls, El was fascinated with the surrounding area, looking carefully at every corner of an unfamiliar place. Gifted by the goddess for a happy life, Noel with a light heart went to the city. In a cozy cafe, he took a drink and a few dishes to get back after the road. The owner of the institution, noticing a stranger, asked in but whether he visited from afar. Just resting at the table, Noah drew attention to the poster hanging on the wall. A bright postcard announced the pregnancy of Saint Stella. Without being surprised, Noah wondered what he was for the announcement. In response, he heard only a newspaper note that his wife decorated a little. The smiling cafe owner gladly announced that the Stella holiday was waiting for a child. A real miracle that has fulfilled the excitement and happiness of the whole city. The news of the pregnancy of Saint Stella and her engagement with Prince became a real blow to Noel. After lunch, El paid for the dishes, and then left the city where he spent a lot of time enveloped in his own thoughts. Walking through the forest thicket, El lifted his eyes to the sky and sighed hard. The soul was painful of painful awareness. He is not even able to congratulate the Holy Stella, his former beloved, with a future child. Now the world is convinced, for all it seemed to have evaporated, disappeared, as if it had never existed. Unexpectedly in the woods, just before Noel, the explosion broke out. The fire column saved the air and rose tens of meters, cutting through the tops of the trees. Elstad was frozen, stunned by a sight, not pulling it. The lightning roar made the young man to understand that the explosion happened somewhere nearby, in a neighboring village. Without hesitation, he rushed there, racing in the face of danger, cleverly jumping through obstacles to see what happened. Hurrying there, Noel froze from surprise and dissatisfied, squeezing his lips firmly. Before him was a giant hydra, who robbed loudly, spreading her numerous heads. Right in front of the hydra stood a small figure, a woman, exhausted and seriously injured. She reached forward, in vain trying to stop the monster that was moving on her. Meanwhile, the terrible hydra rushed at the woman, spreading all 5 mouths. Stunned by fear, she covered her eyes, preparing to meet her death. But suddenly, an unusual sound came. Sleeping her eyes, the woman realized she was still alive. Raising her head, the girl suddenly realized that she was in the arms of a young man who had a witchcraft reflected the attacks of Hydra. Leaning closer, the young man wondered whether she was intact. Significantly angry with an unexpected refusal, a hydra with a deafening roar rushed to Noel, not wanting to put up with the advent of the one who stopped her and deprived the desired prey. Without any slightest hesitation, he rushed directly at the hydra, and the lightning attack of the sword struck her. Among the splashes of the blood that fluttered on all sides, Noel with a gloomy face watched every movement. In order to join the duel with Hydra, he had to release a stranger who had just fallen to the ground. But staying in the middle of the battle, she looked with surprise and delight at a stranger who at a decisive moment saved her life. After the Hydra was overthrown and soullessly stretched on the ground, Noel stopped right before this girl. But in a hurry, and without hiding the grip, she exclaimed, "The young man just won the Hydra on his own." Finally, Noel's voice interrupted the silence. He paid attention to the girl's condition, noting how exhausted after the battle with Hydra. Alice wondered whether she had been injured and wounded. The girl pressed her palm to her chest, smiling, assured that she was all right with her, and she did not get any scratches, all thanks to him. In warm words, she thanked El for saving her from Hydra alone. Suddenly the boy's gaze appeared, and his mouth involuntarily revealed from an unexpected find. On the neck of the girl he rescued, he noticed a collar, an irrevocable sign of freedom. Catching this alarming sign, the young man wondered if he was wrong in his guess. When El pointed to the collar, the girl only clenched her lips, without deciding to say a single word. Lowering her head, she confessed with pain in her voice, "She turns out to be a warrior. That is why her neck is decorated with this collar, the symbol of what she has a master." After her gaze, the girl told that she, as a warrior, was instructed to accomplish a certain task, and that there was no hint at the escape during a mission. She was put on her neck. Unexpectedly, Noel made a proposal, just to remove the girl from the girl. His words stunned her. Shouting in surprise, she asked if she understood properly. With her hands raised, the girl was preparing to deny, convincing that it was impossible. But she failed to finish her opinion. Noel was ahead of her, reaching out her palm and saying a destructive spell. At the same moment, the collar slipped from his neck and falsely fell to the floor. The stunned girl settled on the ground, not dating how that could happen. It was barely audible that this collar is the strongest, to break it only by the head. When the girl settled on the spot, the anxiety appeared in the look of Elle. In addition to the collar, the body of Branka was also adorned with a seal, a sign that her will was forbidden. But despite this, Elle promised that he could get rid of this mark. Sleeping to the ground, the girl slowly removed all the armor, opening a mysterious seal. Noel carefully lifted the fabric that covered her neck, and his eyes immediately fell on a bright sign beneath her. Considering the symbol closely, he noted that this sign looked surprisingly powerful. The girl shared with him the seal that she was imposed, special. Even if you collect all the magicians of the world, it is impossible to remove her, such as she was given an explanation. Studying the mysterious label, Elle thoughtfully touched his lips. Having extended her hand forward, the sorcerer said the spell of the destruction, and the ceiling that the girl's body was shaking immediately began to melt, gradually disappearing from her skin. After finishing the witchcraft, the girl looked at herself with a surprised look. The seal really disappeared. The teacher emphasized many times, "This is not possible at all." Considering her own hands, the girl whispered in numbness that she still cannot believe. She finally became free and no longer belongs to anyone. The emotions squeezed her, and without resisting, the girl leaned her head and was quietly tearing. Slightly shaking, the girl looked at Noel and gave him a sincere smile filled with gratitude for his liberation. She said with warmth that he was now in debt to a young man, because he made so much for her. Leaning over the girl, Noel noted that she still does not know her name. Obstachly, the girl replied that she had not yet learned his name. A smile appeared on the girl's lips, and she called herself Sarah. In response, the guy bowed easily and smiled sincerely. He was called Noel Vega. With warmth in the voice, Noel confessed that he was glad to get acquainted with Sarah. Sarah was amazed by the unexpected kindness of Noel. Without getting off the ground, the girl sincerely admitted that she was also genuinely happy with him. After dating, the company began to prepare for the trip. Noel was surprised that he did not even think about what they had to go with Sarah now. Sarah sincerely thanked Ali for her clothes, and he, having discouraged, apologized that she had to wear his belongings. With a light smile, he promised to give Sari a women's outfit, as they would return to the city together. However, the words of Sarah unexpectedly, "This will not happen. Now the city has become a city ghost." Hearing her confession, Noel seemed to be awake. He opened his eyes wide and asked again, side by side with Sarah, headed to the city, which at first glance seemed to be a solid ruin, a deserted, abandoned place where almost every building was wiped from the face of the earth. Looking around, Sarah shared rumors. The city was survived by the attack of demons. According to her, after this catastrophe, the kingdom isolated the whole area from the outside world. Their path led to a destroyed building that was once a home of Noel. When Noel finally approached the threshold of the destroyed home, mercilessly destroyed by the attack of the demon, she turned to Sarah, jokingly emphasizing that she became her first guest for a lot of time, so it would be nice to put the master here. Sarah, a little surprised, returned to the interlocutor with a question. Without wasting time to explain the plan, Noel raised his hands to the sky, and in a moment in the air the spell of transformation and purification. At the same moment, the descendants of magic appeared on the spot. They skillfully gathered the debris of the house, lifted them into the air, and returned the structure to the building. Hela's dwell raised with renewed beauty, as if it had never been destroyed. Sarah was not kept fascinated by this spectacle. Such art seemed to her a real miracle. Kinding up in his house, Noel invited Sarah to visit, and both settled at the table. Silence lasted for a long time. Elle raised his hand, dare to ask what brought Sarah to this village. Her gaze dropped, and the verse sounded uncertain words. The girl's uncertainty was a deep shadow on Noel's face. He wrinkled his forehead and asked with warmth why Sarah could not share the memories of her loss. Apparently the past is still painful in her heart? Lowering her head, Sarah said quietly, "It is not about it." Finally, having gained courage, the girl confessed that she feels the need to open up Noel all the truth. A slight shadow of doubt flashed on her face when she added, "The reason for her advent to the village named the execution of the order obtained from the kings." The mention of the king was puzzled by Noel. At this point the girl continued calmly. At the behest of the ruler, she must erase any traces of Noel Wiggs's existence. Enchanted, Elhan immediately realized the conversation is about him. With a dark face, the hero asked Sarah why the king so carefully tried to erase from the memory of the world any references to Noel Viga. The girl only shrugged, recognizing that she did not know it because she was not allowed to such secrets. Sleeping his fingers on the table, Noel asked the girl to question whether he considers himself the king's combat property, because it was he who instructed her this task. Sarah, staring at the table, calmly answered that he did not belong to the king. The palm covered the lips of Sarah, and the eyebrows shifted in the expression of restrained pain. The tears could not be allowed. She confessed that the owner, who was discussed, helped a lot in the most difficult times when the demons were still in slavery. However, despite their merits, this person did not cause pleasant feelings. The news that a man had done many good deeds in the years of enslavement of the demons was stunned by Noel. A suspicion broke out in his soul. Was this character not familiar to him from the past? Without hiding anxiety, the young man quietly insisted that the girl immediately called him the name of this person. Hearing from Sarah that the man was called Gud, Noel came to the surprise. The sounds of the name associated with the past, which would like to erase forever, as if they were cutting on the nerves. It was covered by a trembling tension. Watching this, Sarah asked the young man to ask if he was familiar with that man. Ella was barely audible that this person is really well known. Sarah's heart enveloped indignation and shame. Lowering her head, she said bitterly that the actions were playing the hero, and especially Prince Cain, called her at once. Sarah heard from them that for the sake of destroying all the traces, Noel would not regret even the whole ghost of the city. For them, erasing the land from the face of a neglected settlement is a trifle that will not interfere. Despite their high position, these two were real villains. Unexpectedly, Noel was confidently looking at the girl, and strongly stated that he became a real hero who saved the kingdom from Lord Darkness, and not a prince at all. Hearing it from the young man's mouth, Sarah lifted a confused look, and as if not believing in her ears, asked once again. The young man claimed that he had defeated the owner of the demons. However, the monarch cleverly rewrote the glory of his feat in favor of Cain, and the real hero of Noel was left in the shadow. Gwaddle and the Word did not deny such a version, so the people sincerely surrounded the prince with attention and affection. The unexpected recognition of the deception struck Sarah. She looked at Noel, unable to understand how to accept this truth. Prince Cain was not a hero. Noticing the confusion in the girl's eyes, Elle decided that Sari was difficult to believe in his words. Closing her eyes, Sarah denied. She said calmly and confidently that she finally understood everything. It came to her. The king ordered her to erase all the traces of a real hero, so that no one, and for a moment doubt, as if a prince, a true hero. In her own eyes, the girl saw Noel alone with Hydra and saved her life. So Sarah was sure that this young man really had a great force. Undoubtedly, such determination and courage are a true hero. The gaze slid to the mug with an element, wanted to say something, and suddenly the stomach gave a loud grunt. The girl immediately stopped and fell silent, shyly lowering her eyes and involuntarily biting her lip. Her cheeks flashed. Realizing that the girl is hungry, Noel got with a smile from the table, saying that she would prepare something delicious for her. Sarah, without hesitation of a second, jumped off the place, full of enthusiasm, and hurried to say that he would inevitably help him in the kitchen. Water was urgently needed to cook. So Noel with Sarah went outside to the well, but instead of cool moisture at the bottom, they were only awaiting emptiness. Lowering her gaze, Noel noted that it was very strange, because the goddess of the earth protects these lands, and therefore the drying of the well is simply impossible. Sarah leaned over the hole, closed her eyes and listened to. No water came from the depths. Even more alert, Noel had browned his eyebrows and scratching his chin thoughtfully, trying to understand what could happen to water. A few minutes of reflection, and the proposal came to check what was happening to the hacker. At the place where the hacker had to hide, the surprise was surprised by both. In the heart of the room lay the seals used by demons. In their mystical radiance, such a power was felt that these symbols could even call God or spirit. The elimination of these bonds was only under the power of the demon itself, which imposed them. Looking at these seals, Noel guessed that these are the farewell gifts of demons left after the attack on the city. Sarah, having suffered, seriously agreed with her guess. Suddenly, the young man clenched his fist and threw the seal from the well with a sharp movement, firmly deciding to get rid of old prohibitions. Sarah jumped in surprise and exclaimed, trying to understand Noel's intentions. At the same moment, when the seal was peeled, a stormy wave of water with a force rushed out, flying all the way. Sudden water spinned, rising a powerful pillar that rapidly grew over the forest tips. From the wave the girl came out and exclaimed happily, "Now she is here again." With a sincere delight, the little girl was on the edge of Gokr, from where Noel carefully removed her, cutting off the seals of the demons. Calling all a true hero, she thanked him for his rescue. The impression of the young man was boundless. He did not expect to hear such words from the stranger. The young man approached the girl, asking if she knew him. Hearing this, the girl confidently set her hands in the sides and exclaimed that she recognized the hero at once. Only the true hero is able to take off ancient seals. In addition, she felt the blessing of the goddess herself. The news that the girl really recognized him as a true hero, who defeated the owner of the demons, caused a sincere smile from Noel. With a slight slope of his head, he joyfully confessed that he did not hope, they say, someone would ever see in him a real hero. After jumping from the hookboard, the girl quietly approached Noel and Sarah, standing in front of them. She frankly stated that she was the goddess of the earth, who, despite the restriction of the seal, was not so sleeping at all that not to see the hero. Sarah lowered her head with surprise. She asked a frozen voice whether the girl they were led out of the Hokor was the goddess of the earth, because she seemed surprisingly small. Her height barely got Noel to his belt. Hearing that she was not even recognized because of height, the goddess of the earth was surprised. She said indignantly, "They say not as low as they are talking about." But suddenly something worried her. The neck stretched forward. Confirming the worst premonitions, the earth was frozen in shocked silence, as if we were horrified by ourselves, and her eyebrows gathered dissatisfied with the nose. At the same moment, she jumped sharply, scared by pointing to the Sarah, who hastily retreated, raising her hands up. The voice of the goddess came as a thunderstorm. He accused Sarah of the fact that there was a demon. Noel's gentle hands carefully hugged the girl, not letting her break out. A gentle smile flashed on his face, full of rest and confidence. In a soft voice, he reassured a frightened girl, convincing that everything is under control. And Sarah was in fact a good demon. Surprised by raising her gaze, the goddess asked him. As soon as the goddess finally mastered herself and stopped shaking in front of Sarah, Noel took her to the ground. Sarah, approaching El, carefully examined, and then, after a while, she wondered thoughtfully if he really knew from the very beginning who she really was. A demon. The surprise of Sarah was no limits. Even realizing that she was a demon, Noel still rushed to her defense, rescuing from Hydra and freeing from Tavra. Ella explained with a smile, the girl was in danger, so it pushed the boy to the act. She does not weigh at all whether she or the man or the demon. Following these words, Sarah lowered her gaze and smiled involuntarily. The goddess of the earth was briskly on her feet, assuring everyone that there are no reasons for excitement, because Sarah belongs to good demons. Then she gladly suggested to get acquainted and introduced herself as Aqua. According to Aqua, she has to take care of this hospitable and wonderful terrain. After a brief acquaintance on the part of the Shara, the face of Noel and Sarah shone smiles, and they also had fun their names. But suddenly, when the atmosphere became warmer, the stomach of the Akka's stomach was loudly from hunger, and the girl inadvertently clenched her belly with her hands. The goddess did not even try to hide embarrassment. She confidently lifted her head and simply stated that she had been hungry terribly. Such frankness made Noel smile. Closing his eyes, he noted with a slight irony that even the gods seemed to be devoid of hunger. She enthusiastically suggested that Noel cook something together. Her gaze slid to Aqua, which was much lower to height. Interest without hiding wondered whether she was capable in causing water. Aqua immediately agreed, and in a moment the bucket gleaced with clean water, which she filled with algae. Finally, they were able to prepare the dish, for which they made so much effort. A little time passed, and several fresh food plates were already on the table. Noel watched with excitement, hoping that the dish would taste like. Shrugging at the table, Sarah, with notes of pity, apologized to Noel. She felt powerless, because she could not be useful to him. Hunting, except that it was a little succumbed, but that is why it was thought of how to apply a knife. Elle, having introduced this idea, assured Sarah that it is not necessary to worry. Taking the green leaves from her plate, Aqua wondered with interest if weed was not a weed. Noel turned to the goddess and calmly explained that it was not weed, but a wild edible grass. Only then did the shark come to the shark that it was a real delicacy, not a regular weed. Having tasted the dish prepared by Noel, Sarah was satisfied with her eyes and pleased with happily that the taste exceeded all expectations. Seeing Sarah reacted, Aqua skeptically noted, "Demons do not understand food at all if they eat some strange edible grass." Gathering all her determination in his fist, Aqua quickly threw a green plant into her mouth and closed her eyes firmly. After tasting the dish, Aqua opened her eyes and exclaimed with enthusiasm, "So delicious that it is difficult to believe. Ordinary grass, and the taste is just incredible." The goddess instantly attacked a plate with food without hiding the delight. She greedily questioned how the herb could be so delicious. Sarah, interested in lifting his eyebrows, turned to Butt, as if guessing. Did the gift of heroes help him so masterfully prepare the dish? The young man, breaking away from the dinner, calmly answered, "This is not magic, and not a special shaky." A little time has passed, and everyone has already coped with their portions. Aqua glowed with pleasure, confessing that she was eating well, although she had recently doubted that the herb could be so delicious at all. When everything was reached, Sarah returned to Noel, gave him a sincere smile and thanked him for the wonderful dish. After a hearty meal, Noel turned to the girls who gathered around the table. According to him, when the emotions lay down after the news of the betrayal of friends, abandoned homes, and empty streets of the village came in thoughts. All this made him think about the future and the past at the same time. The tart pain clenched the mind, forcing Noel to turn away. He said bitterly that since then the demons attacked Sarah, the whole village where they first met was in isolation. After crossing his hands on his chest, Noel listened to Sarah reported rumors. The inhabitants of this village went away, notwithstanding their lives among the ruins that remained after the attack of demons. After lunch, Aqua lazily stretched, and with relief noted how good it is that people are safe in a new place now. At the same time, Nadia was glowing in her heart. The residents will still return home. Noel's gaze slid to the Aqua, which was still nurturing hope. Suddenly, after relocation, residents would return to their home. Rarely breaking these dreams, the young man said that it was unlikely to happen. Inside, the goddess of verse went out hope. Faced with sadness, Aqua lifted a tired head from the table, and full of longing, confessed, "Loneliness confuses her. The goddess of the earth went around, empty, without human presence." This is what the goddess emphasized, and makes Noel doubt whether people have left these places forever. Raising from the place, Elle easily and carefully laid his hand on the head of the goddess, exhausted alone and forgotten by people. But, indignantly pushed his hand, she asked in surprise that he was leaking it. The smile shone on Noel's mouth when his gaze dropped on the girl. He confessed. He returned to his hometown, which became a cradle for AQU. The young man with warmth said that he would now remain here forever. The queen looked in surprise at Nael standing next to her, and wondered with surprise. Did he really choose a simple rural life, though it was he who thanks the state to his rescue? After all, people should adore him, not a prince. The smile slid on the face of but Elves. He crossed his hands on his chest, and said that even a peaceful life in his performance would never be ordinary. After all, he is able to work for 100, so he will cope with his own. The achievements will exceed the efforts of the whole community. Friendly waving his hands and illuminating his face with a warm smile, he suggested that it would be great to bring back the village former life, to revive him as once. Returning to the Yaka, who looked at him with surprise, Elle wondered if she separated his hope. Sarah's hand glowed in the air. She quickly responded to the proposal, passionately stating that she was ready to join the settlement. Noel, smiling jokingly, leaning to the Aqua, which was still on a chair, and promised to looking forward to this moment. The smile shone the face of the goddess of the earth. The longing disappeared, and she joyfully assured Noah that it is always possible to count on her support in the revival of the village, because here her care, as before, gives a good and sensitive patron of the land. Once in the open air, everyone took up the restoration of the abandoned village. The first concern of Noel was the abandoned fields. There is something to change here first. His interlocutor Aqua immediately guessed the intentions, and, swinging her hands, began to prepare the land for future gardens. Sudden movement, and her hands rise up, causing a stormy wave of water that hangs right above her head. It is this life-giving moisture that the earth needs, because only in this way they will be able to sprout vegetables and come to life with these barren spaces. Surveying the nape of the nape, Noel was already going to note that the vegetables should first sow, but did not have time to speak. The passionate breath escaped himself when Aqua, without making any effort, caused water. Transparent streams spilled on the dried land, instantly soaking it to the roots. Squeezing her hand into his fist and raising her above her head, the goddess of the earth with a triumph exclaimed. Green sprouts of vegetables one by one break through the renewed soil, as if all around come to life. Putting his hand to the side, Noel smiled and informed the Aqua that the sprouts were growing much slower than she would like it. His words forced the girl, too, to stub her hands in the sides, and in a moment a cheerful funny broke from her mouth. The divine patron saint of the earth pointed to a fragile, bright green shoot, who suddenly made his way through the ground, although nothing was sprouted here. The curious girl turned to Noel. If the seedlings usually do not grow so fast, what is it for a miracle? In the capture of Noel leaned to a little shoot. It was unexpected to see such cheerful sprouts. Sarah also leaned closer and exclaimed, "What Aqua charming!" And Aqua herself raised her head, calling them not to restrain the delight and get carried away even more. Suddenly, the confession was made. This case was not only reserved by its efforts, but also by the support of other earthly gods who stood on the side of the good cause, because everyone sought to come to the aid of the hero. Noel, perfectly aware of all this, still said with a bitter smile that he is now only a hero in the past. The smile illuminated the face of the Aqua, and she bowed her head respectfully. There is no value to whom he was, the past hero or present. The earthly gods remained indifferent to the titles, as they were all united by a common desire to help Noel. With a gesture, which emphasized the determination, Aquixes confidently pointed to herself. She assured that, like everyone else, she wants to support the hero and is ready to help. Elle answered with a sincere smile and warmly thanked her for her readiness to come to the rescue. When the last plant was planted, Aqua, enthusiastically erupted, turned to Noel and Sarah with confidence in her voice. Now it was time to return the village of the former appearance, which it was to the attack of demons. A smile appeared on Noel's face. He supported her plan and promised to turn this village together into a cozy and brighter place. Aqua, without spending time, immediately suggested gathering for breakfast. Weeds. Ellen proudly corrected her. It is not weeds, but wild grass. For some time, and walking through the forest, Noel came across a lonely goat. Taking the opportunity, he immediately threw her on her neck with a collar with a leash. Taking the carts in his hands, Elle strongly moved on, and the goat, without any objection, obediently stepped right behind him. The young man was surprised that he could not imagine, in this forest, which was attributed to mystery and wasteland, he would be able to come across a goat. The miracle is real, in his opinion. In the forest, along with Noel Aqua, he came across a goat. Inspired by the find, he began to look for other animals nearby. The girl pointed to the bushes lively, happily exclaiming that another goat was hiding there. The goddess of earth wiped out of the mouth of a hungry saliva with the palm of her hand, and happily exclaimed that with 2 goats they will have fresh milk every day, which they can enjoy plenty. Stepping on Aqua, Noel expected to see another goat. However, barely crashing through the thick thickets, he fossilized with surprise. On the ground there was an unconscious girl with golden hair. There was no goat close. Without spending a minute, the young man rushed to the rescue, descending next to the girl. He turned to her loudly, hoping to return to her senses, and anxiously asked if she was intact. In response to the silence of the stranger, Elle stretched his palm and laid the healing spell, seeking to cure all her wounds. However, it did not bring the expected result. The girl did not regret, which forced Noel to bring her eyebrows from anxiety. The case did not move out of place, despite the effort. The healing spell was in vain. The girl never came to her senses. Sighing, disappointing, Noel carefully lifted her in his arms and decided to take her home to help and try to heal the stranger on his own. After getting home, Noel carefully put the girl on the bed and covered with a warm blanket. He settled on a chair near the bed, slowly wiping the sword. It took a little time before the girl opened her eyes and was surprised to realize that she was in a foreign home. The sudden movement, and the girl sits on the bed, instantly looking at Noah and eagerly asking where they are now. The young man who was engaged in his saber was distracted and asked if she finally came to her senses. At that moment, Aqua broke into the room, shining with the joy that the girl finally came to her senses. The Aqua rushed to the nearest dishes with a quick movement and filled the glass with crystal with clean water, using its power. The stranger gently swallowed this water and, harassed, not tasted such a delicious drink. After the girl made a few sips of water, Noel finally explained her everything. He confessed that she saw that she did not open her eyes all this time, suggested that the girl was bad, so he decided to take her home. Sighing and losing her gaze after the young man's words about her condition, the girl confessed. Her life has tried her more than once, so she feels so depressed now. She said she came to relax to the village nearby, looking for an alarm there. The windows in her house remained closed for a long time, so when one day a fresh and crystal clean air broke into the room, it surprised the girl. The charm of surrounding nature seized it so much that the paths have led to a forest lull. Wandering between the trees, Zamriana, she suddenly escaped the route, took off her feet and hurt her head. That is why the girl lost consciousness. Listening to the story, she said quietly that she had not eaten or drank anything for a long time, so she is feeling a real famine now. Nail nodded with understanding and suggested to cook something delicious for her. Studying his blade thoughtfully, Noel suggested that the demonic seals were removed from the Aqua, and she gained freedom. The surrounding air became more transparent and fresh. That is why, probably, the girl dared to go outside. Attaching her palm to her chin, Aqua thoughtfully stated that water recently rushed into Barren's soil and returned his life for the first time in a long time. This is probably the cause of such striking changes in the local atmosphere. Putting her hand on her heart, a girl with golden hair called Sonia. Her smile was sincere, and the words of gratitude Nail sounded from the bottom of her heart, because she did not leave her in trouble and saved her. For cooking, they decided to eat a goat, which Noel recently brought home. Aqua, smiling, gently milked the animal, and next to it Sonia kept a box for bottles of milk. Meanwhile, Noel, along with Sarah, was watching the process from the outside. Watching Sonia helps Aqua to milk a goat, Noel noted that, in his opinion, Sonia is a wonderful girl. She managed to find a common language immediately with Aqua, which cannot but be respected. Sarah stood next to Noel, losing his gaze thoughtfully. Quiet, almost whispers, she supported his words. The sadness in the girl's voice did not go unnoticed. Turning to Sarah, Noel asked what happened to her. Sarah shared with him her anxiety about Guyad, a cruel owner from the past. If she does not return, there is a risk that Gwaddle will send someone else to her search. This could jeopardize not only the village, but also the life of her new friends. Noel's warm hand lay on the forearm of Sarah, as if trying to convey calm and confidence. With a smile, he assured that together they would definitely find a way out, and not allow Gwaddle to go to her search, so it is too early to worry. It was at this moment that Sonia jumped to him and stretched out a mug of milk. Swing a glass of milk to the bottom, Sarah delighted his wonderful taste. And Noel, watching her with a gentle smile, was glad. The drink seemed to help Sari forget about the sad memories and cruelty of the former owner. Suddenly near the Seine jumped a cheerful and restless Aqua, as always. She had fun to hurry the girl, because the goddess of the earth just decided to arrange a race with her to the river. Turning to the Aqua, Noel persistently asked not to force Sonia to control the alcohol factory together, because the girl did not recover from illness yet, and it could be too exhausting for her. However, Aqua was only neglected by the remark. In response, it hugged Sonia, clearly showing her protest. Hearing the words of Noel, Sonia bowed her head. Despite the beliefs of others in her recovery, the mental scars would still be yadded somewhere in the depths of the heart. It was at the moment that Sonia frankly shared her mental wounds, and Aqua was wary next to her. Her voice was alarming. She asked if Sonia would be able to talk to her frankly. Recovering from surprise, Sonia turned to Aqua, holding her breath away from surprise. Suddenly the girl lowered her gaze. In the corners of the eyes the tears glittered that Sandy tried to hold her teeth in her lip. From the excitement on the part of the Aqua, the girl shuddered and softly sobbed, covered with emotions that could not hide. Lowering her head even lower, Sonia looked up with her hands. In his voice he sounded a real despair when the girl confessed. The bridegroom tore the engagement. Aqua looked at her with surprise and gently clenched Sonia's palm, seeking to support her girlfriend. Hardly the Aqua did so, Sonia could no longer hold back tears. Despair escaped. She sobbed. As we sobbed, she confessed that the whole city was just talking about the termination of her engagement with the bride, and these rumors finally brought her out of balance. Hiding her face in her palms, Sonia trembled with fear and whispered, "Fled from the capital." Aqua gently hugged her hand, trying to reassure. "Don't cry. Everything will be fine." Sarah, in despair, exclaimed that the worst man was not worth finding, and Elle added indignantly, "This guy sees nothing yet." Gradually calming down, Sonia gathered her hands in prayer and solemnly stated that she probably knew her new acquaintances who considered her bride. The girl added that her elect was a hero who defeated the Bishop of Demons. Hearing from the girl that her fiancé is the hero himself, Noel, Sarah, and Aqua looked at her, unable to pronounce words. Suddenly, Aqua had fun with Ela, elbow to the side, and laughing, advised not to make such a face when hearing the news. The goddess of earth noted that Noel himself understands perfectly. His appearance is not convincing. Departing from the first surprise, Noel slowly shifted to Sanu and wondered if Prince Cain was her former bride. Without any hesitation, the girl confirmed. It was really Prince Cain. She said that after the victory over the giant demon lord, 6 months ago, the prince got engaged to the saint, who was near him at that crucial moment. Hearing this, Satan did not stand it. Tears flashed in her eyes, and with despair in her voice she exclaimed, "The prince waits for the baby." Closing her face with her palms, Sonia sobbed bitterly, confessing that she did not even have time to touch the groom's hands. Aqua immediately tried to comfort the girlfriend, gently calming her. Sarah did not refrain from emotions, and exclaimed that Cain was a real villain and the enemy of all women, and Sonia was not guilty of it. Elle, looking at Sanu, enthusiastically emphasized what she was sweet. Hearing Niall call Sonia cute, Aqua and Sarah silently frozen without bringing his eyes off the new moon. Realizing that he did, he shook as soon as possible. He coughed slightly, and putting his hand to his face, tried to give himself as seriously as possible. Returning to Sonia, Noel reported that among all the people it was her former, Vians, who was now engaged in Saint Stella, was that hypocritical hero. Sonia calmed down somewhat, thoughtfully put her hand on her chin, and glanced thinly on Noel, seeking clarification. In response, Noel confidently confirmed that that's how everything was in this story. Hearing the words of Elle, Sonia finally realized, Prince Cain, her former groom, does not deserve to be called the hero. Aqua was moving that the real heroine is Noel. Sonia only looked at her in a surprise. The abominable young man began to explain the confusion of how difficult it is to explain it. Therefore, Sonia is quite entitled not to trust their words from the first time. However, the girl strongly denied. The words of the earthly goddess sounded too convincingly that she could not believe her. Looking around, the girl noticed 2 goats that she was slowly squeezed by the grass in the middle of the meadow. Feeling the delight, Sonia did not restrain her smiles, and said that this village was really charming. She asked if she could stay here. The real hero Noel does not boast of his achievements, and leads a modest life, that's what she said. Sonia, putting her hands on her chest and leaning her head, sincerely confessed that she was moved to the depths of Aile's kindness. Crossing his hands on his chest and looking seriously, the young man said he returned to his homeland. But much more important to him was whether Sonia would stay here at will. Without hiding the excitement, he wondered if her family would worry about her daughter's disappearance. Warm with warm Aqua embrace, Sonia admitted that she had no idea whether her family would worry. She plans to settle in an abandoned place far from home. But before that, she will certainly ask for permission. Hardly hearing that Sonia still plans to consult her parents, a sincere smile flashed on Noel's face, and the seriousness immediately disappeared. It should be a slight delight. He assured that his genus would welcome the girl in their village with joy. In response, Sonia shone and eagerly agreed. For a while, Sarah's voice was ridden from the room. "Everything is ready." The girl appeared in the door in a new outfit, smiling uncertainly. Aqua turned timidly. "Do you like this suit?" The Aqua, standing just in front of her, looked carefully at the suit, and with enthusiasm stating that it looks incredibly stylish. From such words, Sarah was even more confused. Losing in words, timidly asked if he really thinks so. Sitting on the floor, Sonia laughed cheerfully, covering her hands with her mouth, and joked that Sarah was a real woman, and therefore should always shine. Sarah smiled happily, connected her hands, and sincerely thanked the Sani. Leaning to Sani, Noel quietly confessed that she could not imagine about having such a talent. In the middle of colored fabrics and tangles of threads, Sasha looked like a real creativity. She said with a smile that the art of embroidery for a woman is considered a standard of good tone, so to master this case perfectly did not allow her heart. Sonia with a smile assured that she would make every effort to help everyone in their cozy village, which was still to be revived after the invasion of demons, so that the residents could return to their home. Putting her hands on his thighs and smiling, Noel noted that Sonia now looks much cheerful than when Elle found it, exhausted and exhausted. Hearing these words, the girl was alert, and then warmly smiled and sincerely agreed with him. Along with the body of Hydra, which Noel won, rescuing Sarah from the deadly embrace of the monster, was frozen in indecision. The look full of shock sliding on a crushed monster. It was difficult to believe that someone managed to cope with such a terrible creature. This dignity, when the dwelling was filled with silence, Noel worked alone on the field. Drooming hoes, the young man loosened the soil. It is here that seedlings will soon be planted, which will eventually turn into a joint lunch for the whole family. While the case began to engulf him with his head, a familiar man in the lat came behind. The same one who recently came across the woods on Hydra. Confessing that the village was abandoned for some time, but now he came to life again. He has attracted Noel's attention. Hearing the voice of the guest, the guy put up the job and turned. A familiar silhouette was put in front of the man, and at once the memory broke out. This was his friend Gershas. Noticing the traits of Noel in the young man, the old acquaintance was surprised and, not hiding surprised, wondered that he had forgotten in this abandoned place. After that, Noel brought Gershas to his home, where he immediately explained his presence. The purpose of his visit was to search for the missing daughter of the Knight's Order. The conversation about the team only broke out as Elias asked the details, and at the same moment the look of Gershas stopped. At the table he suddenly saw Sanu. Instantly picking up, the hero immediately recognized Sanu in a figure. In surprise, she exhaled and exclaimed loudly, "Someone," and Gershas did not see all the eternity. The surprise engulfed him when he heard that Sonia had been in this village all this time. The voice exfoliated indignation. After its disappearance, a real fuss reigned in the estate. Lowering her shoulders, Sonia quietly confessed that she understands everything perfectly. She is incredibly ashamed because of it. Noel's steps came between the tables. He stopped near the Sonia, sitting at the table, and with a call for his hands. He has been confident with his confidence. He still believes that the family of this girl takes a great position in society. Not only the bride of the prince in front of him, but also the daughter of the commander himself. Sanja did not deny, calmly confirmed, Gershas was telling the truth this time. In fact, she is the daughter of a commander named Hushur Diamati. With curiosity touching her lips, Aqua wondered if the commander's rank was really so important. Noel turned to her and explained. The commander is a key figure in the whole army. A warm smile blossomed on the lips of Grizz as he looked at Sanja. Lightly raising his hand, the young man noted that her relatives would be worried about, because they have no news about the place of residence or the events that happened to her. Carefully, with a note of worry, Grizz suggested Sanja to return home. At his proposal, Sana touched his cheek and shyly confessed that he did not want to go home. Even though they are waiting for it, the desire to stay and help outweighs it. Gershas, stunned by her words, asked. The knight, still not understanding what was happening, broke down to Noel and hardly demanded explanations. Noel kept calm and, addressing Gershas, explained that they had already discussed it with Sonia. First, the girl should get at least permission from her relatives to stay here. Gershas only tiredly hit his palm on his forehead, sighed and made it clear that now everything was clear. It was at this moment that the door dissolved sharply, and on the threshold there was a Sarah, loudly notifying everyone of their return. Noel, postponing the thoughts of Hrisa, immediately gained his gaze to the newly arrived and warmly congratulated the girl. With a smile on his face, the man noted how Sarah glowed with joy, returning home. The girl boasted with the exaltation. Today the catch was great. Gershas, who observed this scene, clasped his lips and intensified in Sarah. Going together to the yard, Noel with Gershas caught silence under the starry sky. El, with a slight smile, remembered the old days when they went into unforgettable adventures together. The young man's gaze slid into the night, and he wondered if the Gershas was in the army, to which he calmly confirmed, yes, he served. Lowering his head and closing his eyes, he said focused. The new leader entrusted him with an extremely important mission, and it was for the sake of its implementation that he found himself here. Returning to Noel, Gersh shared heard, they say. Sonia saw someone in a neighboring village, but as soon as he went to pick it up, the territory was wrapped in the bustle. The maids, clearly excited, attacked him with shouts, convincing that there was no Sonia here. Lightly lowering his head, Noel noted with a smile. Despite his assignment from the new leader, first of all, Gersh was worried about Sanu. The new moon noted, this trait is characteristic of Grid, which he has known for many years. On the face of Gershas, there was a shadow of doubt. He wondered with Noel. Or does not seem because his own behavior has changed. He is too carefully protected a girl who almost does not know. The knight assured that El protects not only Sanu, but also a demonic girl. Just as Gersh started a language about the demons, Noel was alert. It became obvious that it was a matter of Sarah. The knight lowered his head and acknowledged. The case was really uncertain, but despite this, a clear goal was ripe inside. Saying this, he began to pull the sword out of the vagina slowly. Nail could not believe his own eyes when Gershas's behavior suddenly changed. The warrior's hand rode to the sword's arms. He cleverly snatched the weapon. The young man, confused and concerned, turned to a longtime acquaintance, trying to understand what was happening. Gershas said with a serious look. Sarah is a demon designed to fulfill an important mission. The knight wondered why Sarah lives with Noel, despite her task. Elber explained that certain circumstances were the reason for their life together. Gershas sharply put the sword forward, directing it directly to the Noel that stood in front of him. The knight was cold that his true goal is to make sure that the girl really works. The situation could be much more dangerous if Noel was not responsible. No other dared to assert seriously. Who knows the true purpose of Sarah to erase any trace of its existence? It was because she obeyed another's will, and was supported by his protection. The words of the former brother did not affect the Gershas at all. The sword was continued to be focused on Noel. The knight was transparently aware that his team was the leader in his team, who won the Lord Demon himself, and then immediately gained the glory of the invincible among the best. Continuing the story, Gershas, with enthusiasm, said that his new boss has such a power that without hesitation, he could claim the position of commander-in-chief of the Knight Order. Noel, losing his gaze, thought about the words of Gershas about Guadal. Squeezing the sword's arms even stronger, Gershas warmed. His mentor has extraordinary force, and if the task remains unfulfilled, the consequences will become extremely fatal for all. He will not stop until he gets his own. Looking at the knight, to which the duty was much more important than friendship, Noel assured Noel in his eyes. He is quite ready for the fierce rage of the owner. He froze with his sword, not believing his own eyes, Gershas, and no idea that Noel drew to go against his own beliefs and the will of his teacher for the sake of Sarah. The impression was covered. He quit the question. Is it ready to resist the whole army if his choice is at stake, without the shadow of fear of the whole army that threatened Sari? Noel boldly replied to Gershas that he was ready to go to the end to save her. At the same moment, the knight resolutely rested his feet on the ground, preparing for the attack. Noel has raised his eyebrows, realizing that the inevitable clash with Gershas, which is full of zeal to complete his knight mission. The determination of Noel's determination, which was not frightened by neither threats nor deadly danger. Gershas froze, putting a sword forward. Finally, the heavy storm emotions subsided inside, allowing the head to lean down. The clumsy hands are cluttered, and the fingers slide on the nape of the neck, the sword blade gradually sinks down, while the tension falls. Without any unnecessary words, the calm voice of Gurus carefully states, "Now it is clear to him why Noel is good for everything for the sake of saving Sarah." The gloomy, muttering Gershas, not hiding the surprise that Noel stood up for the demon girl. The knight asked El whether he realized that Sarah does not belong to herself, but only serves as an instrument for others. In response, El briefly noted he had already removed the collar from Sarah. The news about it quickly reached the knight, and the next day Ali began to ask about the details. He was most interested in whether Noel really managed to remove such a collar. El explained with calm certainty that the reason is one: he is a hero. Gershas heard even more. In inviting him to a frank conversation, Nalel spent his guest to his home. Only here, Gershas finally allowed himself to relax and remove the heavy knightly armor. Meanwhile, El put a collar on the table, and this unexpected action caused a real explosion of rage in Gershas. The confidence that El is actually a hero just strengthened. By pushing the chair, Noel left a collar on the table, just removed from Sarah. While Gershas, stunned, studied this sophisticated proof, holding his hands on the table, Noel wondered. After such a spectacle, the knight was already convinced of his words? Gershas, firmly clenching the collar in the palms, stated with a serious expression, "In this world, there is only one indisputable truth. Someone who has managed to remove this collar cannot be an ordinary inhabitant." In response, Noel only shrugged, calmly noting that he is now a common peasant, not the legendary hero of the past. From the lowered collar, the knight directed Noel. The words of consent broke out of his mouth. Now he is only an ordinary inhabitant of the village, not the heroic figure of the past. However, in his voice she was curious. Why to a real hero to appear in such a place? He was fascinated by the desire to learn the whole truth. Gershas listened with interest to Noel's story about how they conquered the demons with his friends. But, unfortunately, later the same comrades betrayed him, declaring the hero not someone like Prince Cain. After heard Gershas, he slowly sank at the table. Slowly sank. Noel told about that story in detail, and Gershas, gloomy, slowly drank something from the mug. But as soon as the story came to an end, anger reached the boundaries. The knight was frantically a mug on the table. The splashes flew all over with loud swearing. With a tense gesture, touching his face and bowing his head, the guy acknowledged. In fact, it was strange to entrust the demonic girl of destruction of a village that no longer existed. However, he could not even imagine that such a deep secret listened to this business. When Gershas finally calmed down, Noel, who was sitting opposite from the beginning, slowly turned to him, looked into the knight, and sounded his request in a calm voice. Looking at his face, Gershas nodded, making it clear that he was ready to listen to the request of Al. After a frank conversation, Gershas learned the truth that the king hid so skillfully. Niel went out to the yard to chat with Sarah. There he told the girl that Sonia was already returning to the estate. Along with Sarah, the puzzled Noel confirmed that everything happened. Sani has to come back to quickly explain to everyone what a lie about a self-esteem. Sarah wondered who would make a dream company on the way home. Noel told Demois that Sanu would be accompanied by a Gershas, an ancient friend who has been trusted since the times when Nalel worked as a researcher. She added that Gershas had already come here in search of a dream. Listening to Noel's whole story, Sarah nodded with interest, and then he suddenly turned to her again, suggested that he disassemble the prey that the girl brought from hunting. Sarah eagerly supported the idea and thanked her sincerely for his help. Suddenly someone's little hand grabbed Noel firmly by the sleeve, not let him step. It was Aqua, angry and upset because Sonia would have to go back. Putting her eyebrows, the goddess asked Noel when Sonia finally returned to them. The young man looked over his shoulder and shook his gaze to the goddess of the earth. On her face, he immediately had a shadow of dissatisfaction with the departure of the dignity. The answer sounded quietly. The Sana would certainly return as soon as the commander. However, it may be delayed. Aqua wondered in Noel whether he would decide to go with Sonia Gershas, but he immediately answered her with a refusal. Meanwhile, Sarah, all in the swamp and leaf, attracted another deer carcass. Noel, turning away from this spectacle, smiled slyly and noted that there was another matter for Gershas. It took some time and the knight dropped to the city. Gershas was already in the new house with the owner, who immediately set him a task. to find out what happened to Sarah. The owner noted that the need for investigations had repeatedly discussed earlier. Gershas appeared in front of his mentor and, without blinking his eye, lied. They say a demonic girl he had to find got serious injuries in a clash with Hydra and died from them. The widow, resting gorgeously on sofa with a glass of wine in her hand, sighed with pleasure and frustrated with the disappointed that there was no benefit from that demons. Like earlier heard, that was considered one of the best in the army of the demons. Holding the side, Gerza told Guadal how dangerous it is to get into the part where Sarah was killed, because there was a Hydra there. It was she who deprived the girl of her life. The helmet of the knight leaned over the table when he carefully removed the collar from his neck and put it side by side, noting that despite the threat of Hydra, he still managed to find him. In fact, this collar belonged to Demoisi Noel and was removed from her. Gerz assured that finding an artifact is the best of what he was able to do. Taking his master at the request of Noel, Gershas asked Gudal to release him. A report on the task was already provided. In the end, when Gershas finally left, Guadal stayed in the room alone and plunged into silent reflections. Inadvertent lips twisted in a satisfied smile, and a glass with wine slowly emptied. The gaze stopped on the cell on the table, and the relentless thought sharpened the heart. Noel's traces still remained, and they could not finally get rid of them. Lowering the head, a cunning smile stretched on the mouth. Despite the traces that were still preserved from Noel, the Hydra settled in that place, so no living soul is unlikely to take the risk of going into the village. Laughing was almost a frantic explosion from this thought, filling his chest with a frantic joy. On the same day, Sarah asked Noel which happened to the collar, which he recently removed from her. In response, Noel explained that he addressed the advice to Gershas, and he suggested using this collar as proof of her probable death. Smalling, Nilel told Sari that after Gurus demonstrates her collar to Gwandal, he would finally stop the search. He would decide that she really died. Now, they say, the doors of freedom have opened for Sarah. In these words, the girl lowered her gaze and smiled. Lifting her head, Sarah smiled sincerely and expressed her sincere gratitude for his help. She did not forget about Gerz, emphasizing how strongly she appreciates the support of both. Again and again, the girl repeated the words of gratitude, wishing that Noel and Gerz would feel her sincere gratitude. Sanka has not yet managed to leave, as Kinga had already missed her new girlfriend and begged her to return as soon as possible. Nael suspected that Sanka went to bake the pie. According to the goddess, it looked quite logical. Sarah, throwing her eye around, supported her assumption. The first night, when Noel returned to his native village, together with Sarah, they cast a dissatisfied look at the Aqua stretched across the bed. The strange out-of-sleeping Aqua struck Sarah, and Elle quietly muttered that there was no room at all. Noel was dissatisfied with despair and anger, looking at all the bed busy. There is no place for itself. It was not enough for 3 comfort. Elle, jokingly or seriously, suggested that he go straight on the floor. Taking the pillow, he was going to move to another room, and Sarah suggested staying in his bed if she is so comfortable. He added that he will be easily on the side, or even use a folding bed. There will be enough space for sleep. Hearing that Noel intends to give her her bed, and he was going to spend the night in the living room in far from cozy conditions, Sarah jumped instantly. She denied loudly, "It is not even necessary to have this in thoughts." Sarah grabbed Noel's pillow with a decisive movement, blocking his way to another room. With passion in her voice, she reminded that Nael, the master of this house, and not yielding to her own bed, is not obliged. The girl without hesitation announced that she was spending in the living room in his place. The perseverance of Sarah struck Noella, and having reconciled, he uncertainly scratched his back. Swepty, he suggested that if Sarah does not mind, you can divide one bed. Then someone will not have to huddle on the couch in the living room. The joy was engulfed by Sarah when it turned out that no one would have to be spotted at night in the living room. Having flashed with true enthusiasm, the girl without a shadow of hesitation exclaimed that she did not object to divide one bed together. Once in bed, Sarah immediately regretted her ill-advised decision. While Noel was sleeping peacefully, turning to her back, the girl did not leave the girl for a moment. The alien presence did not allow him to fall asleep until the morning. The next morning, as soon as they woke up, Noel rose on the bed and drew attention to the tired look of Sarah. She wondered if she was able to sleep well. The girl replied that she almost rested, and joked that she always looks exhausted. The next day, after she left everyone at home and went to tell the truth about the hero, A surprised shouting suddenly sounded on the street. It was outraged by the Aqua. Upset, it swept it through a faulty oven. Leaning next to the goddess of the earth, Noel confirmed her words. From the outside, the stove looked unharmed. But she worked from magic, and in the middle was quite empty. Elle, smiling, noted that it was incredibly convenient. Looking again at the magic stove, Noel confidently stated that it is impossible to restore these delicate magical mechanisms. Damage is too serious. The news even more upset the Aqua, which was anxious about whether it was not worth reassuring them anymore. Elle, tilting his head sideways, he muttered uncertainly that he could try to repair these details. But he did not promise fully success. Lightning of inspiration suddenly illuminated Aqua, and she began to persuade the young man crazy to repair the magic details to finally work the oven. Noel looked at her with understanding, realizing that getting rid of Aqua is not as easy as it seems. Exhaled by annoyance, he still agreed to help. It was at this moment that Gershas suddenly appeared behind, who had just returned after the assignment from Noel. He was interested in what Alien and Aqua was busy near this magic furnace. A warm smile shone on Noel's face when his friend returned. With sincere gratitude, he confessed how much Gershas helped him, convincing the buzzing that Sarah was killed. Gershas just waved, they say. There is nothing for anything. All this happened because Noel himself asked, and for the friend small requests are not burdensome. In a minute, friends were located at the table where they were already waiting for 2 glasses of water. The conversation continued Gershas, asking whether Noel remained in memory of the girl who once betrayed him, and later, after the victory over the Bishop of Demons, won the title of Court Mage. The rapid change of face expression on Noel's face showed that he remembers the girl well, Akane, who actually rescued him during the battle with the owner of the demons, not Prince Kane at all. Make sure that Elshai also did not forget Akane, Gershas suddenly said. Akane is now in prison. The young man's surprise had no limits. Someone was able to lock Ain. After all, he remembered, this proud nature has always kept him self-confident and would never allow himself to imprison himself. Meanwhile, Sonia paved herself through a tall grass that was chasing from a light wind. Having entered the old cemetery field, which has long become deserted, she noticed the girl. But she stood her back to Sonia, looking thoughtfully in the grave hill. A whole basket of bright flowers blossomed in the hands of the sleigh. Santa greetings. Sanka wondered if a girl was familiar with one of the locals. In response, there was a quiet confession. There was no dating here, only the memory of a good friend who gave life to a dangerous mission. A moment, and Sonia becomes clear. This grave was only recently stood by a girl, and under the stove, a long-time friend who is no longer among the living. The awkward smile played on the face of Sani when she carefully corrected a strand of hair and suggested that the girl visit her. She promised to treat tea and spend time in conversations, because for both this abandoned village became an unknown territory. Without any objection, the girl agreed, and in the end, Sonia led her to the house where Noel lived with her friends. As soon as the front door dissolved, Sonia loudly announced all those present about her return. The stranger, who stood behind her back, looked at a new environment with interest. At that moment, there was already Noel near the Aqua, whose unexpected return immediately caused her sincere joy. Hardly learning about the return of Sani from the task, he immediately rushed to greet her, but frozen in place when he noticed in a stranger the features of Ain. Seeing Noel, Asana was paralysis. She was instantly frozen. The confusion of the girl was not inferior to them. So, turning to him sharply, Asana stared at Noel, without dumbling, from where he knows her. When the realization that an ancient girlfriend is alive rolled through Ain, her arms and legs shook so much that the bouquet, detained in the palms of a moment ago, escaped and quietly fell on the floor. The girl's eyes were filled with tears, and the trembling arm touched her mouth. The mouth froze on the mouth. Noel was alive all this time. Suddenly, the knees were swollen, and Ain settled on the floor, resting her hands, bent her head. The feeling of guilt conquered her, and almost trembling, with bitterness confessed in her betrayal. She apologized to the fact that, having obeyed the order of the king, betrayed a friend and agreed to become a royal magician. The shame because of the behavior of the former passionately wrapped Noel when he suddenly sank. The new moon looked away and hid his face in his palm. Gathering with his thoughts, he turned to Ain. He asked his head and look in his eyes. As the girl suddenly raised her head and met his gaze, Noel leaned closer and wondered if all her actions were related to the same Prince Cain, a false hero. Aqua stood nearby, listening carefully to every word of their conversation. Squeezing his fists from despair, Ina shared with them they were forced by the king. It was he who persuaded everyone to forget about the real hero and proclaim the prince as a savior, so as not to give away hopes in the hearts of the subjects. The indignation was overwhelmed by the Aqua, as soon as her gaze fell on the same girl who had previously betrayed Noel. The goddess herself leaned over a confused girl sitting on the floor and exclaimed, "In exchange for betrayal, Ina received the position of court magic." Hearing this, Ina just became uncertain. While the annoyed Aqua was boiling from indignation, Noel standing behind, she put her hand on her head. With a slight smile, he advised the goddess not to announce Ain. After all, it is no wonder that she became a court Magina. In the detachment of Ain always manifested herself as best possible. The tears moist again. She lowered her gaze and almost whispered. In fact, the main work in the detachment was always done by people. Further, she confessed that the real victory over the owner of the demons was given to El, not she or one of their friends. Waiting for the girl to master herself a little, Noel moved to the table, pushed the chair, and a gesture suggested that Yai placed. He asked to share everything that had happened. He was quietly interested in why something similar happened to her, because her behavior was completely different. Setting up at the table, Noel crossed his hands on his chest and said that Ain had been fulfilled. Recalling the past, the guy noted that she was so cheeky that she even forced him to cook. Aina, when he heard it, lowered her gaze, sat in opposite, and did not say a word. The palm of the forehead, Noel wondered what reason I was in prison for the second time. In his opinion, the court magician should be a mentor, not a prisoner. Is he wrong in his words? These words caused genuine surprise. With an unexpected liveliness, the girl jumped out of place, shouting in amazement. Where did Noel learn about her next detention? Suddenly, the girl again dropped sharply on the chair, losing all her confidence, and she bowed her head. She murmured with his anger at herself, who hoped for the exceptional talents to master the craft of a court magician, and unfortunately, she failed. On the day when the girl was officially appointed by the court Magina, unexpected words were heard. Becoming a mentor, she is now forbidden to use combat magic. This decision stunned Abina, leaving her silent with surprise. The young sorceress, who told in detail the future worker about the essence of her work, noted that since the death of the owner of the demons, everyday magic is increasingly entered into daily life. People are increasingly curious about her, so magicians are tireless, teaching everyone. A barely noticeable smile of a magical girl appeared under the hood. She glanced at Ain and wondered whether she would handle and without her usual combat, which were now in vain. Agina's gaze suddenly stopped at the girl. There was no limit. Having told Noel about this discovery, she bowed her head even lower, and quietly confessed that she feels completely helpless. El, fascinated by Herd, did not hide the surprise on his face. Lowering her eyes, Amin quietly confessed that she studied and improved combat magic for the same captivity. Household witchcraft remained far behind, so now the girl is forced to remember the long, forgotten skills, because the use of combat will be strictly forbidden here. Every day, the court magicians were required to create real miracles, and it was not used to such a life. Having closed in the walls of her own home, she was fully given to training. For example, magicians were easily taken for the restoration of the ancient church. It was a common thing to them, while I couldn't even think about it. Carefully hovering the daily spells, the girl faced a bitter failure every time. And again, when everything went to a scrape, Ain realized with disappointment. She lacked this magic. Her true power remained only combat magic. Nael listened carefully to the confession of a beloved who sincerely repented of betrayal, and, having understood everything, quietly said that it was because of this that Ina had left the palace. The girl only shrugged more and answered his words with the ambiguous silence. Suddenly, raising her head and gathering with his forces, the girl with anger said, "In addition to the reason, there was another one who forced her to leave the castle and leave her position. Adgana infused Ile should know anything about it." The girl's gaze unexpectedly met with the eyes of Noel. She raised her head and directly stated that the plan of the imposter Prince Cain on the replacement of a true hero was prepared in advance. The words were embarrassed by Noel Tensley, so she did not restrain her and asked Inu what she hinted at that. However, Amun revealed Noel's cruel truth. Immediately after the conquest of the bishop's demons, the hero who saved them had to kill Prince Cain to take his place. At least this was the initial conspiracy. The news that the murder has been planned since the beginning for him, not for Prince Cain, was stunned by Noel. It was he who saved everyone, not the prince. The stunned young man silently stuck in Tina, opening his eyes wide. The girl suggested that the whole story was skillfully planned to glorify the prince, to create from him a people's favorite, and thus strengthen his power over all. Neville asked Latina with a direct question whether she knew all this from the beginning. Having taken off, Aina lowered her eyes. She became aware of it only recently, after all the events. This information was stored only among the court magicians, which they belonged to the circle. The girl shared that in that place there was a secret message, accessible only to the elected, who held the relevant positions. Belonging to the court magicians, she was able to open the content of an important document. Listening to the confession of Aina to the end, Noel tensively bowed his head, focused his palm to his chin, and gathered his eyebrows in a strict fold. Concerned, wondered if the idea of returning to the capital seems too careless. The tears of Anina's eyes were touching when she confessed to ask Nalel apology for betrayal. In the pursuit of a high position at the yard, she mercilessly offended him. Although she later left the place, frankly confessing, Aina shared that before she learned of the treacherous royal plan to destroy Noel after winning the demonic owner, was guided solely by her own interests. Her heart remained indifferent because she did not know the real hero, who was betrayed by the ruler. Lowering her gaze, the girl quietly confessed. Because she knew nothing about Noel's fate, she decided to come to his native village. It was here that she wanted to build a grave for him to bring flowers from now on. Obsessing even more, Ain almost leaped his forehead on the table, trying to pick up words for the true gratitude of Noel for everything she did for her. Immediately after that, the girl sincerely apologized, whispered, as she was sorry. After completing the conversation, Noel led to one of the many abandoned and destroyed homes in this village. Bypassing the building on the side, Eve involuntarily shuddered from the state of the ruin. The hut looked at and neglected. A young man was next to her, a decisive gesture of his hand, and in a serious tone he said, "If Aina really seeks to redeem his betrayal after all the trials experienced together, then he should restore every ruin in this village." The stunned herd, Abina could not believe that she would have to restore all the houses on her own. The indignation has already been spinning on the tongue, because its magic is obeyed only by battle, not construction. However, Nalel resolutely stopped her, not allowing to make a word of objection. In silence, raising his hand, the magician said the spell of the recovery, the same as he had once repaired his own home. Immediately afterwards, the ruins came to life. The walls began to grow, the roof was covered with a tile, and the dwelling appeared before the eyes. As if nothing happened, all the traces of the demonic invasion were completely gone. Impulically looking at the restored house, which shined a new one, Ina was surprised. Such a magic is not for every court magician. Only one phrase, which Ellie very much wanted to voice. This task could not. Calmly standing behind with his hands on his hips, Noel promised to teach Dina everything he needed to return home. Detailed from the careful inspection of the house, the girl turned in surprise and asked. In response to her inquisitive look, the young man smiled warmly and suggested that she settle in her home for the time of restoring rural huts. He added that he would not deny, because between them for a long time, and his home is so crowded with guests. The unexpected kindness of Noel felt her to tears. Her eyes were filled with moisture, and tears leaked her cheeks. The girl hid her face in her palms and sincerely thanked Noel for the temporary shelter, even despite all the images that she had previously had. Suddenly, the goddess of the earth ran up to them. In an anxious voice, she called Noah and grabbed his jacket, trying to pull the young man from Ayana and draw all his attention to himself. With anxiety in her voice, Aqua reminded Noel. In addition to the houses, there was another important thing that he completely released from his head. Waking up from oblivion, the young man immediately agreed with her and called for Ain's help. It took a little time. Ain helped to repair the details to the stove, and Sonia, along with Aqua, began to bake cookies. Sonia gladly noted that everything was glory. Meanwhile, Sarah appeared at the door. She attracted a fragrant aroma, so she was only stepping on the threshold. She wondered that it smelled so delicious. Looking back to the goddess of the earth, Sonia asked to invite Noel with her friends. Let them come to tea and eat cookies that have just baked in a restored oven. Aqua gladly answered consent. In the middle of the forest thicket, two soldiers froze opposite each other, squeezing sharp swords in his hands. About a fierce duel will unfold. The young man puts the sword in the vagina, but the man suddenly breaks from the place and rushes directly to him, which causes the boy to be genuinely surprised. The man sharply waves the sword, trying to impress the opponent, but he instantly grabs the weapon and skillfully reflects the blow. The look becomes harsh. The voice feels a call. It's time to check your determination. The sword flies up in a strong male hand. A moment, and the blow will crawl with new force. The determination captures him completely. He is good to fight until the last breath. The girl standing behind and witnessing a fight suddenly realizes that her own father is in front of her. In the gap to stop them, rushes forward, but the sudden touch restrains. Someone grabs her by the hand, asking to wait and not interfere. The girl is interested in Gershas, the cause of the fight between her father and Noel. Meanwhile, two men have a duel. The girl's question was as soon as possible. Thoughts are confused as long as tense silence stretches in the air. Finally, it is called. Something has led us to this moment. There are two horses tied in front of the house. Several people gathered at the table talking to each other. A man who has just competed with Noel thanks him to the rescue of his daughter. Noel modestly assures that he should not thank him. He did nothing special. Moreover, it helps in the village more than once. The seriousness cuts his voice when he returns to the question again. Did she really help in the village? He is interested in whether he was forced to plant hard work. Noel confirms. Labor was missing, so its support has become a great help for everyone. The angry father of Sonia casts a blame for the main character, and sharply asks whether he really believes that the girl is left here only for her own benefit. The confusion is read in the look of Noel when she confesses that she asked her to stay. In the next moment, a man with irritation is heaped with his palm on the table. Raising from the table, his hand touches the sword and calls Noah to rest, not forgetting to remind him of grabbing the weapon. Surprise is drawn on the face of Gershas when he turns to a stranger, recognizing the commander in it. An immovable man turns to Noel and says, "If you already have something to say, speak the sword. So tell the laws of the Night Order." In the thicket of the forest, the battle between Sonia's father and the main character is plowed with new force. The man is intensely preparing to strike the next blow. He claims that everything became clear, just as Gers warned. The blade takes off in the face of a man when he challenges Noel. It is time to show the art of owning a sword. The devoted order is the first to strike a weapon given by the Majesty. Silently speaking forward with the sword, the protagonist radiates determination. The man tries to voice his thoughts about the possible power of these weapons, but he does not have time to say, because in the next moment, Noel is rapidly rushing to him. The gorgeous movement of the guy knocks the enemy's sword, forcing him to fly on the wreckage, and himself quickly slips past the enemy and stops behind his back. Returning to the stranger, Noel apologized, assuring that he made every effort to get in too. There are 2 cups on the table, and a variety of dishes are cramped nearby. Sani's father looks at the distance and confesses with a smile. He would never think that a person who is able to defeat him in battle on the sword will find himself in the midst of a half-empty village. Again, all 3 gathered at the table. The man notes that with such a skill to possess a sword like Noel, fans would be found in every corner of the world. So why does he choose such a death for life? The protagonist confesses that a lot of unexpected happened to him during this time, and most importantly, it was here that he managed to understand what his heart really burns. Holding a fork with a piece of food, a man bitterly points out that it is a waste of time. If he had shown a little more prudence, he would have already held a ceremony of Noel into a knightly order. Having tasted the dish, the man fades for a moment. The protagonist carefully monitors his reaction and sincerely thanks for the good words. But unexpectedly, the expression of the stranger changes to full surprise. The look slides the variety of dishes that attract aromas and does not contain the question, "Are all these vegetables grown here in the village, in memory?" The image of a girl with a flag that stands in front of the knights, and the one who carefully supports the wounded. The juicy freshness of the food is spilled with a tongue, awakening appetite. The nutritional sweetness fills the power of weakened warriors. A satisfied smile illuminates his face when he shares the impression. The taste of this treat exceeds everything that is treated in the capital. From now on, the main reason to visit this village is unsurpassed, delicious kitchen. The daughter approaches a man with a tray and reports that the water here is also surprisingly delicious. She gratefully remembers the goddess of the earth Aqua, because it is she who thanks her with the healing freshness of the drink. The look of a man stops on the cake that her daughter brought, and he is wondering that it is a dish. Sonia with a smile replies that she prepared the meat pie on her own, and very much wanted her dad to try it. The girl cuts the cake, and Dad exclaims in surprise. He did not suspect that her daughter had baked this deliciousness. Sonia with a smile replies that she had mastered this art for a long time, even at the time when her mother taught her with the maids. In memory, it emerges, as they once taught it. She shares with a smile that she dreamed of treating him with this dish for her birthday. Among the calm silence of the kitchen, Sonia again remembers how she sat alone at the table. The father was not at home for a long time. It was not possible to share with him his pleasures. A serious look on the face of Gershas leaves no doubt. Turning to the Sani, he emphasizes that the commander, as the head of the army, had to go through a lot of trials to protect their country. The girl confidently replies that she knows it. Baby naivety has long remained in the past. Someone's hand is already stretching to an appetizing piece of cake. Gers, meanwhile, confesses that sometimes his work becomes more important than the family. The girl emphasizes the protagonist on the importance of everything that is happening. After all, her father's work is to stand on the guard of the country and her future, and therefore it has a great weight. Turning to the main character by name, she emphasizes her words again. Having tried a small piece of meat cake prepared by her own daughter, Sani's father exclaims, "What an incredible taste." Half a piece has already disappeared from the plate. The man quietly apologizes to her daughter for leaving her alone with loneliness. After looking at her daughter, the man says that he now wants to stay with his family. She turns to Sonia with a smile, asking whether she will continue to delight him with delicious meat pies. The surprised look of Sonia is directed at his father. No less affected by Gurus seems again, whether he really wants to stay. The man confidently replies. In memory, the image of a soldier with long hair is embraced in shiny armor. The order to pass on to Guvadel has already been heard, but doubts about this person have not yet dispelled. As he sighs, he confesses. He tried his best to delay this moment, but it seems time has come. Noel calmly says the name of Off. Mature, having jumped off the table, Gershas throws a warning commander. If he heads the army, their country is waiting for death. He has already dealt with this man and knows the price of his leadership. Looking closely at the interlocutor, the man confesses that he also does not leave the feeling that someone else has the country. However, it does not dare to contradict the order of the king. He cannot afford only because of his own doubts. Watching their conversation, Noel hides among several wooden barrels. At this point, Sinea's father thoughtfully opens his mouth to say something. Noel asks whether the guy is really so disgusting. Grez with respect reminds that Noel is a real hero. He assures that this is clear, because his ability to control words with the help of a sword is a true handwriting of the Knight Order. Sani's father adds that he would not ask for such eloquence that could be disgraced by the promise given to the family relic. But Noel still apologizes for it. The face of a man instantly changes. Seriousness covers him. If this is true, it is impossible to entrust Gwaddle's duties now. There are many good on the shelves. A girl with pointed ears is interested in Sonia, whether Noel has finished talking to her father. With Sanka's smile, he happily answers, and tells the girl that her father seems to finally give her consent. A calm girl attracts her look. She asks whether she is worried, and because of that. In response and only in surprise, brows. Sonia recalls how a fierce fight between Noel and her father. In the imagination, the figure of the father is adamant and proud, surrounded by a whole army of knights. Thanks to the brilliant possession of the sword, he confidently rose to the highest stage without any protection. Although Noel is considered a hero, even in this battle is dangerous. The girl laughs in response to the words of Sonia, and then looks at her in surprise. In memory, there is a terrible image of a multi-headed monster, Hydra. Once, just approaching this monster, the knightly order sent 2 detachments at once. Smiling, the girl turns to the Sani, and is interested in whether, in her opinion, there is in general someone who can harm a person who has won the Hydra on his own. In the middle of the field where the plants are green, someone enthusiastically points out that this place now looks gorgeous. The commander, along with the main character, smiles quietly, sitting in front of a colorful landscape. The man confesses that it is still difficult to believe. Recently, this village has been a wasteland. Noel proudly reminds that this result was achieved only through joint efforts. Frozen in the severity of the look, the commander turns to Noel. Did not others decide to stay in the village? What is it here? With an unmoved expression, the young man confesses that his only dream is to fill the village with peace and give everyone a chance to live here happily. 3 girls stand nearby. One of them is happy to scratch, enthusiastically shouting what it is delicious. 2 others, meanwhile, lingered near the goats that were quietly grazing in front of them. A girl with pointed ears, sighing hard, holds a rabbit in front of her. The guru standing in front is surprised. The wool of the beast is so thick and voluminous that it is difficult not to notice it. The main character with a light smile turns to the commander, reminding that even if the house is lost, this place always remains open to them. According to the commander, it seemed waste to the hero of such a level as Noel to spend their hand at defending a small village. Sanny's father looks at the main character and confesses. In the depths of his soul, he bites the envy of such bold aspirations. Among the wide fields of Nael and the commander stopped in the middle of the green plain. The man slowly returns to the hero and says with a smile, in order to protect his youthful aspirations, time to take care of his own strength. The bones should be well. In the middle of the open-air space stands a beautiful building. Sonia passes on the father. He can return home when she wants. And if suddenly the desire to taste the cake appears, kindly asks in the village. They are always waiting for him. The commander grew up before her daughter and asked if she could cook the cake at home. The girl with a smile confessed to her father, who still wants to try to treat several loved ones. After these words, the man glanced to the main character. The man presses the Noel his hand firmly, with hope in his voice, asking to take care of his daughter. Noel nods in response, taking this responsibility. On the street, next to the horses, the commander looks around. Zelsi reports that Noel sincerely seeks to help. In response, Gershas nods, supporting this opinion. As soon as the Hesses and the commander rushed, a group of girls remained watching their departure with the main character. Noel, with delight, noted that he had never met such a reliable person. Meanwhile, one of the girls with a radiant smile boasted a good day. She managed to hide a lot of great game. With a slight smile, Sana notes that her support is addressed not only by Sarah, but also by Aqua from Noel, with whom she was also able to find true closeness. In the hands of the hero, the closet was cozy, and he sincerely thanks Sonia. The girl is interested in whether she can try on the upgrade. Sonia willingly agrees, only asks to appear in her new form. After dressing, the girl goes to the bathroom. The lost girl casts a look at herself and notes timidly that in her opinion, she is clearly not enough. The girl raises the division of the dress, jokingly noting that her underwear resembles a regular ribbon. Puzzled with a girlfriend who is opposite, begins to worry and asks not to attract attention. Sasha is striking how great these outfits fit the Aqua. The words of the grip are rushed out of her mouth. The girl quickly captures Sasha's tastes and imagines that it is a regular ribbon or rope. At this point, someone is cautious and politely apologizes. The room appears in the room, dressed in an extremely frank suit, and turns to Sonia with a joking question. Is not it just a ribbon? The attendees are in amazement. All the views are directed at the guy. The girl removes him from the room, ordering to change immediately. Such things are forbidden here. Shame, and all in the same spirit. Aqua jokingly points out that Sonia was still going to put it on, and she is wondering if she sits comfortably. A light room with exquisite ornaments and large windows is equipped with a bedside table, which stands for an elegant lamp. The girl lifts the boy's mug of hot tea, bows, and addresses him. Prince Kane. A smile appears on Kane's face. He takes a cup and thanks her sincerely. The shining window reflects the silhouettes of several houses. The signature states, "A mansion, where new residents will settle soon, are almost ready." Smiling, the girl is wondering if it is true, and then confesses that he is extremely advice. The printed inscription on her t-shirt is pleated with the letters T, and he notes that her sincere smile is able to push anyone to act faster, and a fresh black t-shirt is just an ideal. A guy with long hair suddenly breaks into the room, not picking up words. He threw a swearing on the move and called someone a weirdo. With a slight smile on his mouth, Prince Kane asked the new moon, which was annoyed. The angry Gwaddle brings the prince disappointing news. The commander again postponed his powers. Looking closely at Kane, Guvendal puts him reproach. You ignore the king's order, deliberately delay. Is it all because you are the father of her former groom? He is interested in a cute, Surprise covers Prince Cain when he faces Guveli's fierce look. Turning to him, Cain asks why he broke up so much, because everything is not the way he thinks. With his calm determination, Goundel asks Cain this time to simply refuse him. The answer is muted irritation. Cain insists not to sharpen the situation, because the commander enjoys the general respect and genuine commitment of subordinates. Any haste only stirs the knights, and they will certainly resist. Guadal approaches the prince with decisive steps, wondering whether it will be possible to curb him at the command of the king himself, and how you can remove this young man from the road. The girl's indignation flashes instantly. Turning to Guyad, she sharply demands to stop unjustified accusations against Prince Cain. An envious guy throws a vigilant look at the girl and suggests, "Let her decide what to do next." The girl wondered Cain if Hasher had a knight order. In response, Cain cited the words of the commander, who repeatedly emphasized that he perceives the order almost as his own family. That is how he usually expresses before people. The girl does not hide her delight. Similar words really impress. Thinking, the girl emphasizes, "Whatever happens, the family is in the first place." He has a daughter who grows in loneliness, and when choosing a sleeve and a duty to the order, the family is always more important. After these words, Cain looks at the girl with anxious astonishment, trying to understand her thoughts. A mysterious smile appears on her mouth, and doubts have doubts. Will he be able to stay in his place if there is a choice between her daughter and the duty? Before the fields extends a hill, sometimes littered with trees. A group of men in masks froze on his slope. One of them hesitantly shifts a mask, opening his face. He suggests, if someone dares to interfere, let them erase everyone from the face of the earth. Orders to move. Present without hesitation support his decision. Rapidly rushing forward, the guy holds his hand at the back of the sword's hand. Suddenly, something attracts his attention. He snatches the sword instantly and sharply looks sideways, alertly asking, "Who is there?" Suddenly from the tree sprouts Hair, holding his head. It is surprised to ask if it is not his place. A mysterious man in a mask casts a cold look and notes that only one enemy is in front of him, so his time of his subordinate to deal with him. Without receiving any answer to your words, it turns back in a confusion. It is difficult to believe in the silence. The whole detachment is scattered on the ground, no one will move. The stunned guy frozen with his eyes wide open, unable to understand how this happened. Suddenly the tongues of electricity flash around him. Frightened, he instantly loses balance, falls down with a cry, and sword slips out of his hands. Just before her eyes there is a girl in gloves with a focused face. Both hands are raised, one extended forward, and sparks jump out of its palm. Gershas's view stops on her. It was such a determination that he was waiting for the one who enters the detachment of hunters from the King of Demons. The girl without a shadow of pity explains. This time she acted restrained and deliberately deprived the enemy of life. Something else approaches them, reporting that the danger has passed and around everything calmly. Looking at Sarah in surprise, Gers did not resist the question whether she was not guilty of the death of these people. In the girl's hands, several mutilated bodies. However, Sarah confidently replies, "This is the case of Noel's hands, because there was no opportunity to fight it." Not at all surprised, the guy notes that it is pure in the spirit of Noel. Immediately interested in Sarah, where he is now, Sarah explains that the fence is designed for goats, and now it's time to feed them. Without stopping, then pulls the residual residues, and sharply orders the Gershas to stop kicks and finally join the case. Silence and twilight are dominated outside. Only the sounds of a small fountain can be heard between the trees. The protagonist confesses that the Aqua power helped him overcome obstacles. She thanks to the girl, thanks her. Satisfied with herself, the girl laughs and straightens proudly. With a smile on his mouth is interested in the guy. "How do you think who blessed this village?" Sighing, the girl stands in front of the boy and confesses. All this is only because of her immediately before the insidious intentions. Even the deity would be left without words, though it has long become a goddess. With a smile on the mouth, Sonia looks at the shark, whose nose has extended significantly, and thanks her. Thanks to such a gesture, they will never be forgotten. Before the crowd, Gershas and Sonia stand with tied hands, meeting the views of others. The protagonist notes that it would be nice if their leader himself told everything to people, although it is unlikely to be easy. Keeping full calm on the face, Gershas proposes to entrust this conversation to him. The leader of the gang, lying on the ground, suddenly lifts a voice in a frantic cry. Nearly he squats Guru's, and he, hoarsely turning his breath, is wondering with surprise how it was possible to return. Gershas quit questions about the purpose of his stay in the village. But the guy just looks in response, not intending to explain something. Boldly slamming his fist on the palm of his hand, he asks the interlocutor whether he will continue to make a silent. Warns that if the silence lasts, you will have to take harder measures. The sparking girl smiles and offers her help of Gershas, promising to check how many lightning strikes this guy can withstand. The guy raises his head, looks at the girl in surprise, and asks if he knows the reasons for her appearance. Her gaze is full of surprise and distrust. Clearly does not recognize the interlocutor, so, without spending time, she asks who he really is. The boy's face shone with joy. For him, it was a real honor that Kenna himself wondered his name. Born in the nobility, she became an invaluable ally for the detachment heroes, never boasting her own achievements. Her noble determination proves how cool she is. The girl's cheeks were blossomed with a blush, and Gers with a trick is wondered if she is an introvert. Without moving from the place, the young man continues to watch her, lying. The girl, with a decisive look, puts her hands in the sides and once again emphasizes, "No." The young man sighs and notes that they both were trapped in this village. The girl does not retreat and insists. She repeats her question, "Who you really are, and will you open to me the cause of your detention in this place?" Confessing that the purpose of their visit was the daughter of the commander, he changes the course of events. At once, all the views are directed to Sanu. Surprised by raising his eyebrows, Sonia asks, "Is all this for her?" And immediately interested, "Why?" The girl assures that she came here quite consciously, of her own will. Trees have grown around the stone, night darkness prevails. The young man notes bitterly that the fact that she was washed with brains is guilty of everything. Sleeping the top next to the boy, Sonia reports that she had already received a blessing from her father. Her interlocutor, however, does not restrain and asks again. The protagonist, still quietly watching everything, finally calls. He would like to hear the interlocutors, but it seems that there is no mutual understanding between them. In the night silence, almost every window in the house glows with a warm glow. There are 2 cups of water on the table, and someone's voice encourages, "Let's discuss everything." The former prisoner spoke, talking about the assignment that they had to release the Sasan. She warns her that the foreign will has overshadowed the mind, and the heart is broken. It offers shelter, a place where past wounds will not hurt, and memory will go away a little. It was possible to find it thanks to the residents of the neighboring village. Now he found himself next to 2 girls, carelessly tasting the dish. No one else appears to the guy with the question of whether to pick up their target. Who will think at all to give such an order? Conveniently settling in a chair, the guy only shrugs and replies that he is unknown. Gershas, alarmed by the unknown, approaches Noel and asks what to do next. Maybe reinforcements will soon arrive. At least it is necessary to find out who is behind these events. With an indiscriminate expression, the protagonist casts a calm look at the Gerset and advises not to worry about it. Smile on the face of Noel flashed. Let them try at least hundreds of times. Anyone who dares to cause harm to someone here will pay dearly. The girls give the boy warm smiles, and Gershas points out that he seems to be only one sincerely believes in it. So it's time to look for an effective approach. Suddenly the views of everyone in the room are concentrated at one point. 2 strangers come to the room. One of them, in a decisive voice, proposes to eliminate the source of all troubles. It turns out that it is a matter of the hero's hands. The tall guy in glasses finds himself next to a low girl, and suddenly offers a radical way out. To destroy the very cause of problems, that is, the hero. Noel's gaze stops at them, and is restlessly asked why they all. The girl replies gently, assuring that they do not belong to the villains. She says that they have overcome a long way from distant places. She proposes to talk to T first. The protagonist is amazed at their behavior. To T, the girl adds a few pieces of sugar. It apologizes that their visit came out so unexpected. Along with her, Sonia watches the girl, smiling gently, but throws a little more sugar into the cup and thanks sincerely for the tea. The surprise smells Sanu when she sees how much sugar she pours. The girl only confesses with a smile. Everything is fine, because sweets are her true passion. Before the main character, the guy in the glasses is coming down, and smiling notes, "With you always so, sweets do not rest." Stopping in front of the guests, Gers connects the palms and addresses the audience with a question about their personality. Immediately afterwards, one of the guys apologizes to everyone. A mysterious smile appears on his face, and with a casual openness, the young man confesses, "Before you, the third prince of the kingdom, Schwer, named Schwer. The surprise of surprise grieved Gershas' face. Is not a Schweider closest to them? Unpopular curiosity breaks out of the mouth. Why did His Majesty come to these lands in general? Schwartz states that he came here to get acquainted with Noel. Looking at the main character, he adds that he wants to meet with the real hero who defeated the King of Demons. Noel's calm look goes to Schwartz. With interest in his voice finds out what he means. Lifting his palm, Schwartz makes a gesture that calls for patience. History is ancient and difficult, but now it is more important to hear that it is behind this attack. He is interested in people and their mysterious masks. 2 barrels hid under the wooden beams. At this point, the cold, bloodedness and sober mind of the protagonist do not fail. With tension, he finally realizes, all events are relentlessly pointing to Guadalagan. Briefly reports that the commander Garche resign, the problem is resolved, and everything he really wants is the title of commander. Gers proposes the path and states that if the reason is only this, then the army is waiting for chaos. He is interested in why Schwartz submitted such an offer, whether he seeks to deplete the strength of their army. In response, Schwartz sincerely denies such intentions, frankly confesses that he had no thought at all, and asks to trust him. There is Schwartz in front of the king, known in the kingdom as the elusive shadow of His Majesty and the most trusted of all courtiers. Legendary agility and insight make this husband an indispensable right hand of the monarch. It is difficult to believe that a person of this level was brought to a modest village only for the sake of meeting with Noel. Gershas is doubtful that this reason seems unlikely. A serious expression appears on the face, and a straightforward question is heard to Schwartz. What really wants? In response, only an unmoved, cold look. With a slight smile, the girl stirring tea and assures, doubts are quite a natural thing. However, the prince, contrary to common thoughts, is not so the villains that they imagine. The light breath erupts from the mouth of Schwartz, and on the face, calm confidence. With a smile, he confesses to the head hero that he is glad. Having organized surgery to neutralize the king of the demons, the dignitary met with the hero, which should be made of anthems. However, the amazing courage and achievement of this person have disappeared from the memories, and this is a shame for the whole nobility of the kingdom. As a sign of respect, he asks to show how Nael skillfully possesses the sword. The prince states that he wants to see everything with his own eyes. The girl hugs him, putting his palm to his mouth so that he fell silent. With a smile, he summarizes, calling him a true fanatic. Schwartz informs the protagonist that in this country he does not shine in this country. With his hands in sides, the prince announces with a smile, it is enough to move to his kingdom, and the title of the duke or knight is guaranteed to get without any effort. In the hands of the protagonist, Schwartz hands many awards, and still adds a gorgeous mansion. Naturally, he will receive a remuneration for his exploits. He will be honored and recognized, and there is no respect from the whole country. Family looking at the prince, the protagonist asks, does he make that promise to save him if he agrees to move to the kingdom of tents? Goats are grazed in the detachment. Schwartz confidently responds to the stranger, assuring that he does not have to stay in such a shabby shack. Girls closely follow Noel, and anxiety is read in their views. The protagonist with a caution asks whether the director really tells the truth. Schwartz confirms that everything is said, sincere truth, and calls for a good weighing of the proposal. Despite all the hopes of the prince, the protagonist makes it clear that in this situation, there is no point in going somewhere. Prince Schwartz looks confusedly at Noel without hiding surprise. Without understanding his actions, she is careful about whether the cause of such behavior can find out. The guy's palm stretched forward emphasizes the sincerity of his words. The title of hero, the loud glory to him indifferent. True value is the people who are now nearby. On this prince, in surprise eating his eyebrows, she is interested in, what makes you think so? Turning, the protagonist says quietly, the trust of others and the belief in the business, that's what really matters. This is what he was missing the most. Snunging to the Ene, Noel was quietly interested in whether everything would change without him. She did not even think. A convinced answer sounded strongly. There would be no apology if he decides to just leave. Warmed with a dreamy look, the protagonist hears a sincere confession. Another girl gently confesses that above all, he wants to share life with him under one roof. The protagonist turns sharply to Schwartz and is interested in whether he sees the same thing. Schwartz stands stunned, and the girl gently hugs him by her shoulders and reassures him. They say, it's time to rest and trust her. Looking at the prince with interest, Gershas wondered whether a girl who loves sweets is also a native of the kingdom of Schweier, and whether a noble blood flows in her veins, like himself. With amazing confidence, the girl rests on her hands. The prince, a little shitted, hurriedly apologizes for not introducing it before. In emphasizing the attention to the companion, he solemnly announces, "Before you the holidays of Queen Mitrage, the authorized representative of the Holy State." The views of the entire hall turn to the queen. She is not just a monarchia, but the Holy Queen, the highest figure of the church. Meanwhile, the protagonist, noticing the excitement, is ironically interested. Is there nothing more important to them? The queen raises her hand, reporting that there is really a question, but this time it is quite different. It is about Sakin's safety. Noel looks at her carefully without speaking. The girl, touched his palm to the heart, confesses to them in her passionate dream to conquer this kingdom. In the look of Noel, determination broke out, and without holding back curiosity, she again addressed the queen with the question of mysterious words about the capture of the kingdom. Their frankness stunned Gershas. He kept breathing, and raising his hand, asked to wait, wanting to find out that Noel had just confessed. The girl appeals to the king and the prince, emphasizing, in fact, the whole royal family is subject to destruction. The reason lies in the fact that they assigned themselves the glory of the hero, chosen by the goddess himself, and then even swung on his life. Looking at the audience, the queen proclaims loudly, "The world in which everyone worships the goddess no longer knows sin." Gersh looked at us, reflecting on what he heard, and finally admitted, "That's really." However, he immediately worse, how to oppose them against the king himself. According to the young queen, the people are now forced to endure the disaster that the royal family itself called on them. Presenting the image of the prince and his bride, this couple became the reason to raise taxes for the construction of a majestic residence and a luxurious wedding of the prince with a young holiday. They are indifferent to the possible consequences for the common people. They do not think about the harm they do. However, the residents of the city do not dare to repeat Prince Cain, who is considered a hero who defeated the owner of the demons. That is why the indignation of people reaches unprecedented boundaries. The crowd in rage, anger rages more and more. The girl stops in front of Noel and reports that all the troubles have been added to all the kingdom, another spark in the flame of anxiety. Remembering the local fields, she notes with surprise that this village is surprisingly harvested. It seems that all of this, thanks to the goddess of earth, full of divine energy, amazingly, she says enthusiastically. While these words are heard in the air, Aqua is already behind. She admires herself, but her nose is significantly lengthened. The queen appears in the form of a girl skating in the air, spreading her arms to the sides. It is as if in a secret, it opens. It is an oracle associated with the message that the goddess was conveyed by wishing people a peaceful and peaceful life. According to her, this royal family has lost something important. They are deprived of the right to control other people's destinies. Knights with flags lined up in front of the castle. A silent threat was hanging in the air. The conflict flames seasoned by the Holy State will break the war immediately if they take the first step. It is much wiser to solve everything in secret until it is too late. He admits that for this reason she sought help from Prince Schwartz. In her words, the prince only responds with silent attention. After that, Schwartz notes that they were engaged in gathering information about the kingdom. It cannot be told directly, but he remembers the merchants who have been met. In the memory of Schwartz, a picture appears. Prince Cain, along with the bride, and the royal rooms already penetrate outsiders. The queen stands in front of the protagonist and, summarizing all of what he said, persistently invites him to join the revolution. The young man thinks about her words. AKA's gaze stopped on Noel, who calmly noted, with the assessment of power, he fully agreed. The current government is not able to unite the kingdom. But nevertheless, he is not going to leave his native village. Schwartz advises the protagonist well to think about everything. Now a wonderful chance to take revenge on the king who has appropriated your merits in victory over the owner of the demons. The queen assures that if he manages to lose them, then not only Satania will gain freedom, but also for him will end the lonely life in wild wilds. The prince suggests that it is only necessary to agree for the return of lost honor and authority. But the guy admits, beliefs will remain unchanged, so he is not going to change his principles. Nail notes Schwartz and the Queen that, as long as they have not discussed this issue, it is unlikely to be fully understood. The views of everyone are chained to the guy. In the meantime, he notes, there is something that opens only for a common dinner. Turning, the main character with a gesture invites them to follow him to get acquainted with the village. Fragrant mushrooms sprinkle on grill when the Queen confidently takes a skewer with blush mushrooms and vegetables. Tasting the first piece, it is immersed in enjoying the dish. The girl's face is illuminated. The taste so struck it that, without holding back the grip, she is interested. Is it all thanks to the best components? Recognizes, the dish is incredibly delicious. The main character generously proposes to take as much food as they want. The Queen imposes a prince dish, jokingly noticing, the taste is bitter, so let him get it. The prince with dissatisfaction reminds her that she is not a baby for a long time. In front of the walls of the trees, Prince Schwartz expresses gratitude to the protagonist, noting, everything was surprisingly delicious. The Shara takes a skewer in the hands, and Sonia goes to the table with a tray, which attracts a variety of dishes. Meanwhile, Asurina stands in front of people in masks, showing them a mysterious object. The dish in a frying pan under the skillful hand of Gershas, and he hobby watches the laughing and the appetizing crunching around the moon. It is such moments, when everyone will take another portion and smile happily. They warm his heart the most. Barrels, chests, and bags fill the space of the warehouse tightly. Prince Schwartz, recently visiting the granary, said with annoyance, the power of the goddess of the earth here is no longer as strong as before. At the table, the Queen explains. Without a shadow of doubt, she chose Noel. Food does not leave time for long reflections. Fried treats disappear from the plates one by one. The kebab rises to his lips, and the prince says enthusiastically, wandering in this forgotten village, and I could not imagine that there was such a gorgeous dinner here. If you liked it, it is definitely worth sharing with Sarah, because it cares for all food stocks. Skillfully holding the pole, Sarah carries a pig carcass. All views instantly turn to Sarah, and the prince asks whether she is a demon and why she lives with them at all. Sarah, without getting rid of anything, just smiles, listening carefully to the conversation. Looking at the girl, Noel noted that there was no other road to her, so he suggested that the settlement be reconstructed with him. According to the meal, the Queen is interested in the boy, whether after the defeat of the king, he still sees the enemy in it. Noel begins to answer her questions. In the strict expression of the face of the protagonist, there is a determination. To leave her in trouble is unacceptable. The Queen, while maintaining a serious facial expression, looks at the boy carefully. Suddenly her face blossoms with a smile and she laughs, agreeing. They say that's really. Noel only looks at her, trying to understand the cause of such a reaction. When the guy was called in the name, Alina was silently gestured towards the masked strangers with their leader. She calmly assured, they gave the word not to tell anyone about the existence of the village. Armed with a skewer, the main character sincerely thanks the girl, wondering if she appealed to her. Smiling, she nodded and jokingly wondered, does he really accept all her words for faith? Yes, there is nothing wrong with that. Breaking from the table, Noel suddenly remembers the meat and promises to bring it right now, and then he addresses the Queen with a casual question, can she still eat? In delight and delicacy, the girl immediately replies that there is definitely a place for another portion. Watching this painting by Prince Schwartz, looking carefully at both, side by side with Sarah, Noel throws a few words. Meanwhile, Schwartz turns to the Queen, confessing that he gradually begins to understand why Noel is not able to leave this village. More recently, these people have attacked the village, and now they sit quietly at one table and divide the meal. How strange it is. The prince became the face and voice of those who hide their real faces behind masks. Putting the mug to his mouth, Schwartz smiles and assures that Noel is able to accept any person due to his heroic endurance. The Queen replied that it was, regardless of status or race. For them, this place has become a real island of comfort and friendship, which is not yet possible to look for. Similar corners of the world are rarity. In the guy's hands, Motik confidently unfolds the earth, cutting off her life. The Queen notes, despite the betrayal that befell him in the kingdom, it was enough for determination not to fall in the spirit. He built a house on his own. The girl notes that nevertheless, the status of the former hero does not allow him to stand aside when such events unfold in the kingdom. Among the trees, the flames broke through the darkness, and throwing glare on everything around. Sarah, watching this spectacle, quietly turned to the protagonist. In her voice, there was perseverance. Remembering their conversation at the table, she wondered if he was really ready to fight for her rightful place in this world. I immediately added, "If she dares, will she allow her to be in this fight?" With plates in his hands, the guy looks at the girl and confesses he does not want to participate in a coup d'etat. In the corners of his mouth, a smile flashed when a man assured, "If the case concerns this village, he will only be joy to see her with him." The smile illuminates the face of Sarah. With confidence, she assures the main character that everything will certainly come true. Without hesitation, asks to trust her and rely on her strength. A clumsily jumping, the girl turns to the boy timidly. "Can she always stay with him?" Noel asks, hoping to hear it again, but the girl is not dare to repeat her words. Under the tree, showered autumn leaves, a horse stands near the building. Lights slap on the back, and the voice is behind. The rite is complete. Next to the horse, holding his head, Gersh asks Noel whether the holidays of the Queen and print shorts went. Tom nods confirming it. Gershas reports that they will just return, will immediately begin preparation for the coup. Such words are difficult to perceive for a person who dedicated himself to a knightly duty. Nearby, in front of him, there are Noel and Sonia. The guy reports people in masks. Their rapid response detachment is not visible anywhere. Noel suggests they disappeared before dawn, apparently, not wanting to attract attention. Sonia is wondering if her father is going to challenge the Holy Queen. Gershas confidently denies this. After the attack on his daughter, the commander is likely to be his authority. Thinking, he finally releases his head and notes that even the commander does not lose a sense of true devotion to his homeland. It would be worth weighing whether the king of such loyalty is worthy. Meanwhile, Noel, with a Sanyan, is silently watching Gershas' ring is rapidly moving. With unexpected anxiety in the voice, the girl revolves and is interested in what fate is waiting for their kingdom. The guy looks calmly in the eye and replies that any changes do not matter, because they will not change. They were destined to reduce the village together, to eliminate everyone who stood, and to go side by side. Silently immersed in deep reflections, Sonia realizes that even if Noel remains the former, the world around will constantly change. The guy turns to her. The girl, catching the meaning of his words, is quietly summarizing. "Nothing already matters. Let it be." Smiling, Sonia goes to the house and briskly offers Noel to help with washing dishes after a large number of guests. The young man, without hesitation, accepts her proposal. Sani Mansion. Noel stopped in front of the stranger, squeezing some object in his palms. The surprise ran through his face, because he had no idea that the dating, which Sonia mentioned, would be a meeting with a simple farmer. The man informs the protagonist, despite the previous service, after the last failures with the crop, to get a quality product has become a real test. The appetizing mountain of carrots attracts the eye. The farmer with enthusiasm states that the next time he will necessarily acquire such wonderful vegetables. These words Noel lift the look. Nail delays the farmer, asking him to wait for a moment, because he has another unexpected offer for him. He, smiling, is interested. What is it for a gift? Suddenly, the gaze turns to the side. Just ahead of the anticipation of the danger is a beast with fangs, in which the arrow restrains. Frightened, the peasant instinctively exposes his hands forward and exclaims with despair. At the same moment, a new arrow flies through the air, and even deeper into the body of the beast. The peasant falls on the ground, looks stunningly at the fallen body of the animal, on which several arrows, deeply inserted into the flesh, stick out on the sides. The smile illuminates Sarah when she squeezes onions. He proudly tells how special he went here, not to pull the carcass alone. Fortunately, they met in time. The frightened farmer lightly stifles, acknowledging that this was really a very successful coincidence. A tree stands in front of the house. Meanwhile, in the room, someone pours a whole bag of coins on the table. Each of them can see unique images. All views are directed at coins. The impression does not even hide Aqua, astonishing in surprise whether it is all the revenue for vegetables. Noel confirms with a smile, adding that there are also the trophies that Sarah caught. And all this pulls together for 5,000 gold. Aqua stops next to the main character, looks closely into the eyes, and is interested in what they choose this time. Tastes or something sweet. The guy explains that he was going to buy seeds for a new crop. The girl only squeezes her shoulders from irritation, feeling that he is no longer able to hide dissatisfaction. With his finger up, The main character draws attention. It is worth considering how to multiply profits when it increases in the village. The hot drink from the kettle is carefully poured into a cup that has grown in the rest of the dishes. Aqua looks into the liquid with interest and calls it forest poppy. Sadini is shared by knowledge. This plant is wild and known for its hallucinogenic properties. The locals sold it for big money, because it seems that until recently it was grown here. Aqua's with a thoughtful look assures that everything is clear to her. And then she is gently interested in whether she can find it, if she is allowed to eat all the sweets she wants. Noel looks at her, not believing her ears. The young man's thoughts are spinning around this mystery. He saw it all over the countryside, and apparently he just didn't notice the right one. Sarah suddenly raises her hand and asks if she can speak. The girl shares that she came across a place that was interested in. It is located approximately halfway to the top of the mountain. The mountains themselves rise in the midst of the forest thicket. Sarah resolutely extends his hand forward, pointing to the right place, and reports, "Here." Alina, looking around, draws attention to the poisonous evaporas that are treacherously rising from the ground. Among the dense forest, the boys froze, looking around. To grow the desired crops without interference, you must first solve the problem of suffocating vapors. Noel turns to Ain with hope. Can she help? The girl confidently answers. If everything is so serious, there is a way. Aina raises his hand, the look directed to the same direction. The lightning sparks that dance in the air flash around. The girl calls it cleaning. The sky tightened with clouds. The sun hid away from human eyes. Ain is hopeful with hope if everything is fine. The young man nods and offers everyone to move on. Among the herbs, the view of the plants of bizarre forms is abducted, as if nature itself is played by colors and imagination. The place is breathing in the magic, so beautiful that it resembles the dwelling of the gods. It's hard to believe that such a miracle is hidden next to the spoiled, poisonous soil. Sarah's view is forward. The girl shares her observations. In the center of all attention, a plant with massive petals. Sarah notes a strange tremor running on them. Ayanina only shrugs, they say. Nothing, and surprisingly, from Sarah did not expect. Carefully leaning to the ground, the girl breaks the radiant flower. However, as soon as the stem is in her hands, the mysterious glow instantly fades for an unknown reason. Sarah is surprised to follow him, not understanding where the mysterious spark went. Noel explains that it is simple. The outbreak disappears as it breaks it. Holding in the palms of a faded flower, Sarah lifts her eyes and is interested in Noel if she will lose his taste if she does not glow. Noel's response is affirmative. Focusing on Inu, the protagonist asked if something special happened to her. The girl confidently replies that he knows and immediately takes the case. By extending his hand forward, creates lightning outbreaks around him. It seems that she was planned. At least, she reports with a smile. Sindals began to appear one by one, and almost immediately it shone with dazzling light. They were captured by surprise. Sarah and Ayana stared carefully at the brilliant bud. Sarah wondered even more, realizing Ayana's abilities, which she still did not even suspect. The girl again lifts her palm to the flower, thinking thoughtfully that maybe now the cold magic will go down to her. Noel carefully warns, if you turn it into an icy statue, then the taste is no longer felt. Just cool a little. The hero noted that this method will allow the flower to stay fresh for a long time. The bright light flower was carefully put on the basket. Expanding that there may be many such flowers nearby, Noel shares her guess with everyone. Adina impatiently asks for permission to apply magic, explaining that they will fascinate these plants as soon as we come across them. Suddenly, Sarah exclaims that she has already found one. Many identical flowers shine in the basket. Nearby lies a tired sinner, with a vestibule recognizing that the forces are leaving her body. Noel's palm touches Inez's head easily, and a surprise appears on the girl's face. She was sorry for apology. The young man is wondering whether she has grouped her hand. She invites her a little rest, and in the meantime, she is proclaimed to search the river and collect water. Sarah gently sorts with his fingers one of the flowers, conveniently settling on a stone. With a smile, she notes that thanks to the magic of Agena, their plan has come true today. Significantly embarrassed, Agena confesses. Noel is also able to spell in a similar way. Sarah's gaze stops at Ayin, and she asks with interest if that's true. Ayin nods approvingly. The image of Noah emerges in memory in armor. Remembering those minutes, the girl confirms that during the victory over the King of Demons, he did all the feats alone. With a tender smile, Ayin pulls her hands and, barely jokingly, confesses. Sometimes she does not need it here, but this time she was given the opportunity to express herself. Sarah's memoirs brightly emerge the moment when the arrow dealt with the monster, and she confesses to warmth. She is familiar with that feeling, because she hunted today. Awareness comes, although at that moment he could well overcome the monster before her shot, but he never did so. Ina is asked to Sarah. Maybe everything is based on trust. After all, Noel confidently relies on them, entrusts various tasks and distributes responsibility among everyone. In the memory of Sarah, a picture of Noah's conversation with Queen and Prince Schwartz came out. Then he rejected the generous proposal of the Holy Queen, although Sarah could not believe this word. Looking at the flower in his palms, the girl is called. Then it seemed that for the sake of the common good, he inevitably had to agree to this proposal. In the memory of the girl, the image of the Holy Queen and the commander floats. She thinks that this trust is enough to rely on the Queen and the kingdom inhabitants. Does he share her faith in these people? To the terrible scale of events, he only indifferently shrugs, they say perhaps. Everything he wants to save his own skin, and those few who want to protect from the cruel war. A light blush broke out on Sarah's cheeks, and she was quietly wondered if this thing was about it. That those who were okay to fight with him, side by side, appeared next to him. Noel with a bottle in his hands suddenly appears, having fun announced that he has brought water. The main character, noticing a bright blush on Sarah's face, is interested in what happened to her. The girl throws an even vigilant look in a confusion, and, finally blushing, in a hurry asserts that nothing happened. As soon as they returned home, their attention was drawn on the table, decorated with flower petals. Sonia, glowing with a smile, proudly informed that she soaked these petals in the dough and fried until golden brown. Girls one by one touch a flower. Anna is delighted. The taste is just unsurpassed. Aqua is a smile on the face. It seems even a moment, and the cheeks will melt from this divine pleasure. Admiring the flower enthusiastically, the protagonist plunges out of the dream if he could grow the same. Imagination draws whole colorful gardens created by his hands. The memories of the farmer come to Sanyo, and she remembers that she has heard. It is unrealistic to do it, because crystal pure spring water is needed here. Sarah, hearing this, thinks about the purity of water. Silence came around. All at the table shifted their views on the Aqua. Surprised, she asks the boys what happened. Noel, with a slight smile, puts her hand on her shoulder and says that now it all depends on her. On the street, straight near the radiant flower, which they still manage to grow, Sonia with Aqua squat and smile happily. In the cozy home of the main character, at the table where the mugs stand, two gathered. He and Gershas. Noel looks carefully at the interlocutor, and is wondering whether he agrees to join the coup. Closing his eyes and holding his head, the guy replies, "Since the general became the supreme commander of the army, he will now have to join the army." Having thought about the situation, the protagonist recognizes he has not changed anything, because the general finally made a decision. Gershas confessed that he had been eaten by anxiety for the safety of the sedentary. That is why he could not give final consent. But Prince Schwartz reassured. Next to her always her former hero, so worrying is worthless. Such words dispelled Gersh's doubts and helped to persuade. At the church threshold, there is a holiday of the Queen, addressing the collected inhabitants. The local temple is under its special intercession, so it is unlikely that they are inclined to oppose it. Prince Schwartz stopped in front of a tall clock tower, among a dense crowd of people in thrown hoods. The unknown about the location of the magicians clearly annoyed him. No traces, the very uncertainty. The seclusion of this group allowed to find out only crumbs of information. Ayin appeared in the door, listening closely to their conversation. The girl, as if moving up for a moment, turns to Noel and promises to bring something necessary for him. The young man asks whether she is sure of her decision. Avina calmly explains that although no one is forcing her to participate in the coup, she is not going to stay away. The girl's face becomes a decisive expression, frankly confessing to the girl. He indifferent whether this revolution will succeed. It is sincerely surprised. In the eyes of Noel, the concern flashes. She turns to the interlocutor, insisting, "In the village you cannot do without it, so it is necessary to make a promise, to return back." The unexpected confession of the main character causes a girl's blush. The look runs to the side, but she still nods. In the middle of the trees, in the midst of shimmering light, Amina gladly waves the guys with his hand. On her shoulders, a briefcase, and behind her back the majestic outlines of mountains. Sonia, Aqua, Sarah, and Noel take care of her. Aqua says quietly that she is gone. In response, Noel throws a large basket on his shoulders and strongly states that he then follows. Aqua's gaze stops on it. She is wondering where he is about to go. In the memory of the protagonist, the image of a radiant flower flashes, and with determination he declares his intention to go in search of more Gilamicons, because he seeks to provide them with an army by order of Gershas. The charming plant is amazingly removing fatigue. In the middle of the room, Noel stops right in front of the Aqua and, barely noticeably smiling, says that, unfortunately, he failed to harvest at a time when his ripe time came. Near the pig and a pile of vegetables with a smile on the face, Gershas waves on his face. All stocks and trophies, carefully collected by Sarah, have already passed into the hands of this cunning man. No matter how cool, and even the most wealthy army will eventually remain in need of additional provisions. Having considered the situation, Noel shares that the fee was issued generous. As a result, about 10,000 gold managed to earn. Sarah immediately denies these words. They say, most of the money went to traps and economic stock, so there is little left. Sonia picks up, specifying, some of her spent on spices and kitchenware. Aqua recalls how even the seeds were invested. The guy interweaves his fingers, looking thoughtfully in the distance, and is already okay to say that the accounting is performed by all. But suddenly he is interrupted by Aqua. He was interested in whether it was talking about cupcakes. Noel shakes his head and explains that the language is completely about accounting. Sonia, clutching his palm into the cheek, with a smile notes that such a princess is not taught. Sarah emphasizes that no one has heard among the demons and accountants or accountants. Meanwhile, Aqua, pulling Noel by the sleeve, impatiently reminds, when will they go on cupcakes? Suddenly, someone is addressing the boys and assures that when it comes to budgeting, it will gladly help them with this. A stranger appears unexpectedly on their way. All views instantly turn to him. The protagonist dares to find out. Who are you? Going to them, a girl with a sincere smile welcomes Noel, rejoicing and dating. Her unique talent to work with numbers is striking. A stranger with a bow on her head cast a look forward and stretched her palm, seeking, I am Lily Tent. My brother asked me to help you in this village. Hearing her name, the main character instantly guesses the connection of this girl with Prince Schwart. A vicious look thrown at Lily is immediately a familiar image of the prince. The young girl, calling himself his younger sister, recalls a conversation in which his brother shared his stories about Noel and confesses to him. The young man thanks for the proposal but does not refrain from the question, why she is. The girl smiles and replies that he is like a support for a team, so they need to stay with him. That is why she chose such a capable and reliable assistant to trust. With her hand, he confidently touching the breast, Lilia assures that she has mastered finances and tax business since childhood, so her friends have nothing to worry about. She will take care of everything. Noel's house captures the imagination. The drawers break from the whole mountains of coins, and the real mountains of paper bills are scattered on the floor. Finding the unclear amount of money, Lilia is interested in the guy what it is at the expense. In response, he hears an explanation that they did not touch these financial questions, because the situation is much more confusing than it seems. Lily's look slides on the bills. The face is not surprised. With calm confidence, Lilia notes that despite the complexity of the situation, it will take hours to settle it. A smile is barely emerging. She asks her to give her a new task after his assignment. Noel was not hidden on the face of Noel. She had a spark of curiosity on Lily. Meanwhile, the guy categorically denies, they say, even he is clear. It is impossible to do it. He assured that in the event of failure, no one will make her return, so you cannot rush and think carefully about. Rolling into the room, Nail finds Lily, inclined above the table in a deep dream. A warm smile appears on his face. It looks like a fatigue has taken a mountain. To entertain the girl, he thinks to brew her tea from Yalam Khan. The boy's gaze stops on a book with a gorgeous shiny cover lying on the table. The question of the question is whether the girl has already finished reading. Meanwhile, she wakes up. Her cheeks flash a bright blush. Wiping his face with his palm and clasping one eye, Lilia notices the guy. Finally returned, she said with relief and asks, did she not promise to cope with everything in a moment? Putting the palm on a notebook, the girl announces, All receipts are arranged in this account. Adding too many more books to the table, Lilia says that she analyzed the prices for the crop in the village stores, carefully comparing them with a medium market value. In addition, she carefully distinguished the weaknesses and important points to be improved to consider the effectiveness of trade plans. By reaching out the young book of the book, the girl shares an interesting observation. In the kingdom of the seamstress, the price is these. Despite the hunger times, in her opinion, in such a situation, it is the best solution in such a situation. With a book in her hands, he lifts a joyfully palm and exclaims that it is an edition of extraordinary quality. Her brother was delighted. With excitement, Noel advises to gradually make a real brand. The young man just watches the girl, not believing his ears. In front of him, Lilia holds the book, and slyly smiling, asks the protagonist, "How do you think, if you assign me to an accountant, can you be sure that your fortune is sure to go up?" A bunch of books before the eyes is surprising with the protagonist. The thought instantly flashed in her head, isn't it magic? The book is still firmly clamped in the girl's hands, and on her face there is a serious expression. Worry, it seems, have not disappeared. The houses stand in front of the castle, and there is a rural building between them. Bright flags are slowly swinging on the walls of the fortress. There is no news about the revolution yet. Everything is shrouded in silence and uncertainty. In heavy lats, the commander solidifies in front of the armed knights, ready to capture every word of him carefully. Behind is the fighting flag, adding the celebration. The strict look of the commander slides along the rows, adjusting the subordinates to a serious conversation. In the warm embrace of water, the girls carelessly swallowed, enjoying the moment. The long-haired blonde gradually mastered the relaxation. Closing her eyes, she stretched her arms forward, stretched sweetly and sighs, emphasizing her pleasure. Sarah supported it in a quiet voice, passionately noting how a healing and soothing thermal boil operates. The real meaning of hot spring water opened here in the smiles that bloomed on their faces. Aqua and Noel should be thanked for this. The hero stood confidently with Kale thrown over his shoulder. Aqua jumped near the joy, raising her arms. Directly in front of them was a deep pit from which the fountain beat the source, quickly filling the space around. On different sides, there was a approving Aqua exclamation, which did not forget to add that all this had happened thanks to her. The girl flew up, as if she flew through her girlfriends. Long hair swirled with her. The rest of the girls watched it stunned, covering their mouth with their palms. The head was dived into the water. Aqua lifted a considerable wave, enthusiastically shouting what a wonderful pool it was. The third girl, wrapped in a towel, plunged her legs in the water, stopped at the shallow water, and asked the Aqua, as they managed to create such a luxurious open source. Small smile illuminated the face of the Aqua, which almost completely hid in the water and closed her eyes with pleasure. In response to the girl's question nearby, it was indifferent. This is the usual restoration of strength. And they say, such procedures create miracles with skin, make it gentle and velvety. A girl with a square focused on her chin fingers cast a thoughtful look to the side. The idea has already emerged. This place is perfect for tourist journeys. On the narrow coast near her, aquatics settled, radiating the pleasure of the course of events. The blonde girl, plunging into the water, looked at her big eyes on an alarming face in front. She wondered if tourists were visiting them. The short hay-mother smiled, lifting her finger up. In her gaze, she had confidence when the blonde sounded in response. The thoughts of this opportunity were filled with her mind. Satisfied, turned to Aqua, and a smile invited her back to take care of her back. It seems that these words cheerfully cheered the Aqua. She cheerfully enlightened and nodded new, noting what she is observant, isn't it? The time has come. A new slowly approached Aqua to gently rub her back. Between them, the blonde played her curly strands playfully. She decided to ask her friends with the question, "What will you say about local water?" All the girls instantly turned to her, absorbing their eyes. The Russo Kosa, slowly moving away from Nu and Aqua, swam to another girl. Noticing this change, Sarah turned her head after, interested in the cause of this behavior. Blondes have clearly read dissatisfaction or even insult. Both girls stood opposite each other in the water. The waves barely touched their feet. Blonde, turning to Sarah-san loudly, suddenly asked that she was thinking about Lily-san. Sarah stopped the interested look at the interlocutor, barely open her lips from surprise. Returning sideways and touching her chin, the girl conceived concentrated. In response, a passionate response of Lilia's extraordinary abilities came from the moment she undertook financial affairs, and a lot of help from her. At the same time, the blonde did not hide the anxiety that clouded her face. Skewing between the words, as if looking for the right way to speak, the girl decided to share the news. Recently, treating tea, accidentally heard the conversation of Noel and Gershas. In the past, a girl in shape came to the room, holding a tray with 2 transparent glasses. Meanwhile, one of the men standing away, enthusiastically told about some bright shorts. Listening to this conversation, the girl cast a close look in their direction. Gershas, crossing his fingers, thoughtfully rested his elbows against the table opposite Noel. The questions were raised in his head. What is the close binding of the prince with the king? After all, intentionally provoke a dispute near the borders of the kingdom is a dangerous adventure. In addition, Noel wondered, is not the order of the Holy Queen himself? This is what Gershas replied to Noel. Which perhaps this is one of the reasons. Perhaps the fact that the guy has already learned about the heroic essence of Noel. Hearing these words, the young man looked carefully at him as if looking for confirmation. Gershas thoughtfully ran his fingers on his chin, without drawing a look from the young interlocutor. Gershas said that a force capable of overcoming the king of demons becomes a real stumbling block for the higher echelons of the kingdom. It not only destroys the subtle equilibrium between the states, but also slips out of control of rulers. Not surprisingly, such thoughts are disturbed by his soul. Stretching his hands in sides, Noel noted that first the role of the hero was given to Prince Cain. When it turned out that the real character was Noel himself, the prince should finally exhale with relief. On the table in front of Noel, Gershas put a book. Its name immediately came into the eye. The deprived prince actually became a hero who defeated the king of demons. The cover was fluttering with the image of the same prince with a sword in his hand, and a girl stood next to him. Gershas explained the hero. This biography was created to clearly demonstrate all the virtues of Prince Cain. Every inhabitant of the kingdom must buy it. Noel silently accepted the book without a word, and immediately he began to fussily flip through the pages. The man continued. They say they were forced to publish such a book, because everyone knows how much the defenseless Prince of Cayenne is. Surrounded by 2 knights in silver armor, the young prince barely stood on his feet, in love with a thin sword that almost touched the earth. Some were eager to perceive everything written, believing every word. Even those who believed the king of demons should have been destroyed in an even more violent and treacherous way. Numerous biographies of Prince Cain were huddled on the bookshelves. Gershas voiced this opinion, but all the events in this biography are a solid truth except the fictional name of the hero. No one could predict what vigilance other kingdoms were watching it. Noel was silent, carefully studying a man who had just finished his story. With shaken hair, Sarah fastened her head, lowering her head and firmly squeezing his chin with her fingers. Everything became clear, and that's what hurt the most. A blonde girl sharply rose from the water and shouted, announced that Lilia's son also arrived at the invitation of Prince Schwartz. Sarah's surprise does not hide. Does some hidden plan lies here? With ease and confidence, the girl stated, if nail for someone and opt for her choice, she will certainly be this choice. Her words, turned to the blonde, sounded convincing and calm. After crossing her arms on her chest, the girl with anxiety noticed. This time, Noah and Lily seemed to be purchased. What? How something happens to him? In response, Sarah confidently assured, there is no task that Noah would have coped with. Indifferent. Who will be on his way? The girl's cheeks flashed with a blush, and she exclaimed that she would also join Lily on shopping. Together they were clearly not destined to go. Hands flew into the sides, their fingers squeezed firmly into their fists. With her arms toward a blue-eyed girl who turned, Sarah carefully wondered if she was too much and worried about the details. The blonde, plunging into her own thoughts, focusedly repeated that, you need to carefully check everything in order not to leave any hole. Feeling the indifference of the interlocutor, Sarah asked uncertainly whether someone was hearing her at all. For a while in the city, Lilia with a gesture called a sand. The blonde, lightly staring, agreed with her words. Returning to the girl, Lily pointed to herself with a light gesture and, smiling Sonia with a warm, friendly smile, assured that she carefully explored the prices in all local shops, so now she would be happy to spend the most profitable. Fun singing an unknown song, Lily stepped ahead, shining with a sincere smile. Behind, looking alarmingly, she was walking Sonia, wary of surrounding the environment. Their path ran between the majestic multi-story buildings. The road was suddenly blocked. An unfamiliar figure emerged from the darkness, confidently ordered to stop. The look slid down. Only strong men's shoes were clearly visible from the twilight. On all sides of the girls were surrounded by men with the appearance of robbers. On both sides, the buildings were cramped, and the passage in front and behind blocked these suspicious figures. The first of them, the same one who became across the path, announced loudly, a step forward would be paid. Feeling a threat, Sonia quickly hid behind the back of the Lily. At first, Lilia was silent, and then asked briefly about the price. Sonia was still hiding behind the back of the lower girl. They stood against them, a chunky man who was significantly outweighed both in height and physique. On her question, he replied, 110 gold coins. Lilia did not give a shadow of fear. She noticed with tranquility that such as he was hoping to eat easily. However, 16 gold is quite a fair price, even with the recent increase in prices. Self-confidence was read in all his posture. A bold smile played on his mouth when he said that the discounts are not provided here. He wants to avoid trouble, pays the full price. And it may be different. The body. Lily's cloak slightly slides from one shoulder. Stopping, she wondered what would happen if they screamed in full voice. The man just crumbled and called it stupidity. They say, no one will stick into such a deaf. Their views crossed when the conversation continued to face. Lily lowered her head and her eyes hid under the bangs. A cunning smile appeared on the girl's mouth. Breathing in excitement, she exhaled the question whether it was true. Sonia, who was still a moment, came behind the Lily, suddenly found herself in front. The girl stuck her hands firmly in her back and pushed it vigorously, laying her way forward. Throw over her shoulder. In this case, she will count on support. Sonia, stunning, looked around, astonished and surprised in herself. Faced with the robber, the girl clenched his fists. The murmuring of her lips escaped from her lips, and her mouth opened as if she wanted to utter something, but the words were hanging in the air. In a moment, the girl's cheeks are burning with a blush, her eyes are involuntarily closed, and she breaks into a cry. The voice trembles, the words stretch, turning to a desperate call for salvation. The man who stood in front of them mocked and laughed. With irony in his voice, he promised to stop spending time. Behind the robber stood Noel, and asked with interest whether he was called. Meanwhile, other heads that were just proud of force have already fallen unconscious on cold asphalt. On his face, the leader froze in the fright. He forgot about the former laughter. One of the girls turned to Noah-san when the main character stood, looking forward, and his hair gradually changed. It took very little time. Before the eyes, there was a refined room, near which a large fountain was flicker, surrounded by numerous forged fences. The glowing smile of Lilia testified to her unconcealed joy. She fascinated with the hero, how incredibly to see Noel in battle with her own eyes. Good luck seemed to be truly blessed this day. Folding her palms in front of her, as if in prayer, the girl did not hide her delight. After the last words, she added with a barely noticeable smile that she already imagined how her brother would react. Imagination immediately drew an image of a fair-haired man in glasses with a harsh, piercing look. Noel only smiled at these words, pretending that nothing special happened. Lilia wondered if she realized. Such a flock of scoundrels like these, for the former hero, only children's fun. A bird had a bird next to the girl. A bird wing had a bird above the girl. And when she turned, she inadvertently exhaled with surprise. The front of the palm stretched forward, invited a feathered guest, and the dove softly sank straight into her hand. The girl with a trepidation said she was her brother's dove, and asked for pardon. They said that Sonia appeared here. The blonde got a transparent glass filled with some liquid. Having gained her gaze on an unexpected gift, the girl was enheld and thanked the boy uncertainly. Grasping a glass with both hands, the girl bowed her head and asked where he became aware of their trouble. The guy sitting next to her on the bench looked at the girl and replied that he guessed everything because he was near and worried about her. The girl finally raised her head, turned, and looked at the boy closely. At first, she repeated his words that he was worried, and then, for a short time, she wondered how she felt. The guy's gaze did not break away from her. Slightly tilting her head, the girl noted that, as far as she knows, Noah Sen's thoughts also did not miss that lily. Sonia barely audited something, and then apologized to him. She confessed that she had recently accidentally listened to his conversation with Asus. The guy, without his eyes, was silent carefully, listening to her words. Turning his gaze and lowering his chin slightly, he closed his eyes and smiled. In response, he said that Lilia is now friends with them, living together in his native village. There is no place for hesitation here. The girl's gaze was driven to the floor. Both hands were firmly squeezed. No reaction to the words of the hero is only a deep silence. However, in the end, recognition came. It all remained unclear. Where does he have so much trust in people? It would seem that the royal betrayal has already taught prudence, and it is still open to all, even to the Sarah demon. It is not possible for the girl to understand how you can become the same sincere and open person as he is able to take others from the whole heart. Nael turned to Sonia loudly, calling her by his name. The young man apologized, and the girl confessed. After the engagement with Cain fell, any trust in people was not easy for her. Throwing himself on the back of the bench, the guy thought out aloud. Jointly, the treason gives the courage to trust others again, and this faith becomes a strong basis for real human relationships. In his words, hope and confidence were felt. A bright future is waiting in front of the village, in which sincerity and strong friendship prevails. That is why the young man hopes that Sonia will be able to trust him and every resident of the village. The girl held her cheeks with her fingers, rubbing tears. True courage, belief in the bright tomorrow. That's what appeared in her look. And yet, unnoticed for herself, she thought, why is he so indifferent to her? The gaze aimed at her was filled with surprise and anxiety. The breath in the chest was caught. It turned out that due to the explosions of the revolution throughout the country, he assumed that the next victim of the royal army would be General Hushy's family. In the event of unforeseen situations, Lilius instructed Sarah to protect her. Her calculations were surprisingly accurate. She predicted the enemy's actions in advance. A clumsy smile appeared on the girl's face when she covered her eyes. In the soul, the anticipation of the inevitable development of events has already matured, although, in fact, the idea of the further course of affairs remained vague. Smiling, Noel noted that if he coped with everything without speaking her words, it means that they succeeded with Sarah. The girl's smile immediately responded to him. Sonia's cheeks flashed with a blush, and the words of gratitude broke from her mouth. No shadow of doubt moved in her heart. The gaze stared into a glass, which was firmly held by the confused hands, and the cheeks were already burning with awkwardness. With an expression of surprise in the look, Noel closely followed her reaction. Lily rushed from his side, waving her hand vigorously. A brother's dove was quietly on her head. I apologized to the guys that made them wait. The girl stopped in front of Noel. The guy immediately wondered if everything was fine. The girl hesitantly muttered something, pressing her palms to her chest. With a spark of delight in her eyes, the girl scratched her temple with her finger and shared the news of the defeat of the rebel army. Sonia, barely opened her mouth, looked forward with Noel. Two knights in shining armor were fixed among the trees. Squeezing the swords firmly, they directed the blades forward, preparing for battle. However, in the voices of one of them heard a fright. The words were confused. He shouted about the need to retreat. The enemy seemed too powerful. A sinister smile bloomed on his face when the cries were drowned. It was only a faceless crowd for him, the ordinary Zabrid that fussed around. A mighty warrior with long hair, tightly clamping the sword, boldly lifted him up, shouting the curse. All you are waiting for the road to hell. The image was supplemented with heavy armor that gave it even more threatening appearance, and behind the cloak, like a shadow of impending. Lilia explained to the boys that, nevertheless, the uprising cannot be called complete defeat. Squeezing his fist and radiating true inspiration, the girl said that, for example, General Gush escaped any damage. Therefore Sasana-san can exhale with relief. Sasha breathed a sigh of relief, covered her eyes, pressed her hands to her chest and sides, allowing herself to relax. Noel, Sasha, Sarah, and Aqua sat at the table in a friendly circle, and Lilia was watching. Sarah's serious look spoke for herself. She quietly asked, "What is the real cause of defeat?" Lilia acknowledged that she was clearly underestimated by the true power of the knight's commander. Even ordinary warriors from his command could not resist him. With cold-blooded accuracy, The Gaia predicted all the steps of her brother. The image of this man was etched in Lilia's memory. In the battles with the king demons, Noel did not lose his courage. The fact that he was elected to the hero's army only confirms the true power of the young man. His blade punched the protection of one of the knights in the armor, and the fresh purple spilled on the ground. Noel's look is forward, the fingers easily touch the chin. She said the name, Guadal. Lily's ringing gaze slid on the hero who stood in front of her. Turning to Noel, she voiced a message from her brother. There is only one request for him now. Without listening to the end of the girl's words, the guy ahead of her and immediately asked, "Does her brother want to go to war?" Slightly tilting her head, the girl refused. No, he has no other questions. He just needed vegetables from the village. However, he insisted that Nelel would bring them personally. On a small wooden cart were a variety of vegetables, carrots, cabbage, and other gifts of the city. The young man wondered about these vegetables. He was not objectified against his curiosity, but the girl noted, "This place is near the battlefield." The alarm for the boy flashed in her voice. She was afraid that he could threaten something. With a warm smile, the guy answered Lilia that everything is fine, and he would definitely do it. The girl, lightly supporting her chin with her palm, noted. Then, according to her brother's instructions, a map of the terrain unfolded on the table, and the girl confidently pointed to a certain place. She suggested that he use this bypass. At this point, the combat field was already prepared, a large tent of hood from the presence of numerous people. 4 knights in shining armor have disconnected different corners. Everyone is busy. In the center was a massive table, behind which, thoughtfully staring on the knight sitting nearby, sat Guadal. Prince Cain was accompanied by a mysterious girl. From the heart of approving the valiant General Gudlal, Cain emphasized, the victory was simply brilliant. The surprised general immediately asked the reason for their unexpected visit. Is the reason not related to any problems? The prince hastened to reassure. There was no reason to anxiety, they only came to visit him. The prince noted that, despite the victory won, the mood of the general remained gloomy and asked the cause. The general was angry with his hands on his chest. When asked, Cain answered dissatisfied. If such an opportunity had already had a free time, would it be better to direct the efforts to train the court magicians? In the event of their participation in previous battles, the festive noise of victory would have long flooded the capital. Guadal only tilted his head, lifting his fist to his face in the design. The prince shone with a sincere smile, raising his hand in a welcoming gesture. He assured that everything is fine, no image, and there was nothing wrong. They will soon arrive and will certainly be involved in the next battle. The girl who accompanied the prince gently hugged her cane and, smiling gently, closed her eyes. Outraged, the general thundered that he was indifferent, whether the magicians were late and whether the church was behind them. The prince, in his opinion, should show more nobility worthy of royal blood. A smile was played on his face, and the prince replied, "That's why he trusts Guadali. Only by defeating the rebels will it be possible to unite the kingdom around the common goal." 2 knights appeared in the shade of the prince, which entailed a long wooden chest. The principal was surprised to point it to them, swallowing their breath. In memory he emerges. His Majesty was fond of the general who so bravely manifested himself on the battlefield. Here is a well-deserved award. In the chest, which was carried by the knights, a long sword resting on the canvas. A black and purple, ominous haze gathered around the blade that seemed to be breathing a threat. Sewing next to the box, the general carefully took the ephesus of the sword. The prince said that these weapons were a true relic of their kind, the inheritance of the royal dynasty. An ancient legend tells that they once sacrificed with the life of their owner to drive away the evil god and protect people from dark forces. The general climbed from the place, carefully examining the sword that was held in his palms. I wondered whether these weapons belonged to historical relics. Cain, meanwhile, said that there is a belief that if the blade is full of blood, the dark god will return to this world again. Such prophecy is unlikely to herald something well. The girl who hugged the prince shone with a smile and said, "Now he has even more glorious feats and honorary titles." In a moment, she noticed, it does not always bring good. However, now he was destined to become a real hero. The face of Gudal in these words distorted the disaster, a sinister smile. A happy smile shone on the general's face when he skillfully fixed a new sword on his belt. He said loudly, "Whether an evil god or a dangerous monster, Everything will only become another step towards his glory. In full voice urged everyone to move on. It's time to start. At the same time, on the opposite side of the battlefield, General Hasher sat at the table, leaning with his elbows on the surface and thoughtfully tightly trimming his chin with his fingers. Next to him stood Gurus, raising his hand high so that the bird could comfortably stand on his palm. The general unfolded the message without drawing a close look. The bird broke out of place, and the arrow flew into the sky. Gurus, watching the general next to him, said with relief that the court magicians finally took up the case. The gaze slid on the map, where the small marks pointed to the location of the forces. Magicians were chatting on the right flank, and on the left, like a steel blade, a knightly order was governed by Guada. Their system was reminiscent of a curved clawed paw. In the case of a February storm, there is a risk that all the army will be destroyed. General Gujara silently stared at the map, narrowing his eyes. A drop of sweat rolled down the cheek. Gurus wondered where Prince Schwartz was, among other things, noting the need for retreat at this turn. The general's strategy remained a mystery to them. The presence of the night guard, which reported to men the news. Prince Schwartz went for a morning watch and has not yet returned. Gershas with Gushar was surprised at the guard, and one of them, without restraining the excitement, exclaimed, asking whether he heard the words correctly. In the head of Gruss was suspicious. Did Prince Schwartz not intend to think, or rather the whole kingdom of Schweer, to strike them in the back, taking advantage of a great opportunity? Soon the hoof was stuck on a wide road. A detachment of armed riders drove into the gorge. Shiny armor gleaming in the sun, and behind the backs of some soldiers, giant flags that developed proudly in the wind were fluttering. One of the soldiers suddenly bowed sideways and frozen in place. General Gwindle, who was traveling, asked loudly about the reason for the unexpected stop. On the way, the figure of the rider came out. The night guest stopped the horse, politely apologized and informed the general that their road was blocked by a carriage. The annoyed Godar again shouted about a map without getting tired of repeating his question. From the sharp order of the chief, the subordinates were instructed to immediately deduce the girl. One of the soldiers, hesitantly hesitated, explained that her accompanying man was not simple. Difficulties may have. With indignation, Gwudal attacked the subordinate, pouring images, and then reminded that they were eventually an army. Another moment, and sharply snatched the conversation, saying that it is enough. After jumping with a gallop, the general rapidly squeezed the horse, pulling on the ledge. A look full of interrogation. I quit the question. What is happening here at all? A man appeared on the cart, confidently holding horses. He asked with interest whether he could not hear any noise here, and noted that a lot of time had passed since their last meeting. Looking intently, the general asked what the problem was. But as soon as he met a familiar figure, a tired cry rolled on his lips. Noel's name escaped, with frightened stuttering. He denied what he saw. The famous hero had to be dead. Meanwhile, Noel himself stood, contemplating the commander with a calm, unmoved look. The impression was that everything was left behind. After holding his breath and not hiding surprise, he threw a view on the hero. How did he survive? Or more precisely, where is he at all? From the surprise of the lips themselves shuddered, and wide-open eyes did not look out of the incomprehensible visible in front of them. Unlike the general, the hero retains complete peace in his voice. Many adventures behind his shoulders, but now his days pass among the fields. He grows a harvest and sells it. Today, he is also dealing with delivery, barely noticeably looking and keeping the revenues. Reflected by reflections, the general stared at the distance, reflecting on the mystery of this person. Did he know about the idea of depicting Prince Cain with a hero? Does he know about betrayal? Gudal froze, without drawing a look, and in his head, these alarming issues were spinning. Numerous wooden boxes, generously filled with various vegetables, lay in the trolley. The general suddenly suggested Noel to buy all this shop from him, promising to pay twice as much as a product, only he would turn around and quietly returned home. Allegedly immersed in deep reflections, Noel smiled ironically, once again voicing a tempting offer with a double reward. But earlier agreement requires compliance. No bidding is now impossible. General's face was skewed from shock and disbelief. In his thoughts, he abused the hero that he did not understand his place at all. A smile flashed on his face, and the voice of trembling. when the man eventually dared to offer a tenfold increase in profit. If the agreement is so disturbing, it is ready to redeliver all the products after returning. The main thing in any case, it will acquire the whole product. All you have to do is agree to this agreement and finally leave it alone. Interested, Noel replied that the proposal was really intriguing. If so, then the hero's desire goes far beyond the ordinary reward. Angry to the depths of his soul, the general hastened to assure he was ready to perform any whim of the hero, only he would voice his conditions. He also wondered if the hero had everything he needed. Noel nodded, confirming his consent. However, he immediately noted that for the general, it costs a lot of money. Before finally completing the case, he wondered if he was really confident in his decision, because then it would not be possible to return it, even if he pushes. General's gaze rushed to the hero, full of doubts and questions. The mouth is slightly compressed. The look from under the forehead is anxiety on the face. Thoughts club. What is wrong with me? What a self-confident fool. A light smile illuminated Noel's face, and tilting his head sideways, he said that the general would surely like such a souvenir. Hood's face poured sweat, and he stood in a confusion, without taking his gaze from the horizon. The lips were nervously, and the pupils papped to the linen. The head of the hero about the general was heard in his head. Is it about Husher? Is he his ally? The face of the hero changed instantly. In the eyes there was a crazy shine. The features became terribly threatening. Noel said the moment of return. His pupils blew, and his lips twisted in a terrible, eerie smile. General's face twisted with horror. Heavy drops of sweat covered his skin. Return. Is that betrayal? Said an alarming thought. So, is going to kill him? This lightning guess swept in the mind after Noel's heard. The alarm was back to Gudlin. To understand the intentions of Noel again became a mystery. If he really seeks death, you will have to take the call and fight to the end. The views of both were stubborn in tense silence, and Gudl carefully weighed every word in his thoughts. Looking at the hero, the thought went involuntarily. What if he suddenly attacks? Unlike him, Noel remained motionlessly balanced. The strong tension was hanging in the air. Everyone looked at each other in silence, while in their thoughts played ideas. Ice indifference prevailed on the hero's face when his gaze was chased to a friend. The idea did not leave if Noel was now alert. The gaze slid more than once towards the sword, exactly the one that Prince Cain gave him. Panic rapidly covered Gudala. The eyes expanded from the horror. The lips were convinced on a silent cry. The drops of cold sweat rolled their cheeks from tension, and obscene words were heard in the head. There is no chance of standing against the opponent. Now he is doomed, only a shadow of himself. Compressed lips. Guvadal, without picking words, still murmured curses, exposing his fangs and fiercely clicking his teeth. Kindi the general sharply turned his horse sideways and raced forward with a frantic speed, and behind the cries of subordinates who turned to Gindel Sma loudly, the anxiety distorted the traits of the general. In his view, a frank panic was read. Turning in their direction, Gudel said loudly, "Noel is our enemy, so everyone has to go to the front. Life is the main bet in this battle." Looking scared, there was only one thought in his thoughts: to flee as soon as possible, until he was alive in the world. Quickly rushing the gorge, Guadal strongly moved forward alone, not looking back at those who were left behind. The knights were alone, silently escaped his eyes, watching his back moving away. Mighty riders in shining armor, with naked swords on the sword, were rapidly surrounded by Noel's consolation on all sides. At the same time, the young man, squeezing in his hands, and then sat on the spot without even moving. Staying forward, the hero touched his chin, thinking for a moment. Doubts have made a soul. Is this sword so valuable? The idea, perhaps General Hasher would be happy about such a gift. But the mention of the already broken weapons gave rise to even more hesitation. The knights, threatening the blades directly on the guy, did not hurry to go on the offensive. Noel has already been spinning. What to come up with these warriors now? At the very edge of the cliff, 4 were observed the sight below. One of them sat down slowly, showing peace. Nearby was a woman with a giant stamp, mightily clenched in his palms. There are 2 behind, the owner of a long braid with a heavy book under the armpit, and another observer. With disgust on the sorceress of the sorcerer, sitting on the side, carefully smoothed his palm with long hair back. With dissatisfaction, He quit that the war was exhausting to the edge. He was immediately stuck, in fact, any conflict better with ordinary negotiations. The name Guadalajara broke from the lip of the magician, who immediately paused, turning to one of the subordinates. Did he say, "This is the boulder"? Then he ordered the court magicians to act without delay. On the face of the magician flashed a shadow of dissatisfaction, and the young girl standing behind looked at him alert. Lvovka confessed that for the sake of it she even postponed her experiment. A solid mess. The dark circles lay under the eyes of a girl, as if a severe lack of sleep lay on her shoulders. On the face, a deep dissatisfaction every time she remembered her own focus that suffered from all these worries. From the back, a man with a long oblique erupted, firmly pressing a thick book to his chest. He said calmly that they had already gone too far to complain. In addition, it is the order of the king. He proposed not to delay and demonstrate all his capabilities. The motivating words of the young man did not impress the girl. She resolutely rejected them and stated that she wanted to return home as soon as possible. Instead of passionate speeches, she suggested faster to finish the case and hurry home. There was another sorceress behind, silently maintaining tense silence. Finally, it's time to talk. The magician voiced her own vision of the development of events, asking the audience, "Isn't it easier to leave the past alone and just retreat?" The unusual seriousness was captured in her voice, and the facial expression made it clear. It was by no means a joke. 3 friends, who were closely monitored for the events ahead, turned synchronously, turning her eyes to a girl who came behind them. The magician, with a long scythe and strands of hair on the forehead, twisted sharply after her words. The eyes were filled with anger and astonishment. His cry cut the space. The voice overwhelmed rage and indignation. Breaking, he accused the audience of meaninglessness and emphasized, before them, a royal order. At the very edge of the abyss, like a stone idol, a magician was hiding, and with a barely noticeable smile called himself a real fool. By the way, such small concerns of Ajin is quite capable of solving herself, isn't it? And even a beginner like him, it would be quite possible to cope with it. The girl's face with a staff twisted from disgust, a look filled with disdain. She watched a young man as if he were something disgusting. Her replica sounded a scornful tone. Every time such a person like him voices his stupid opinion, it is impossible to stay. The curiosity mixed with contempt when it demands to explain why this happens. Suddenly, a man with a braid and a book intervened in a conversation. He reproached the girl with a loud shout that thanks to the mercy of the heroic prince, she got a mag, and now she allows himself boldness and superiority. Words face an invisible wall. Let it immediately stop talking in such an arrogant tone. At the edge of the break, the young man spread his hands, mockingly throwing that the royal magician, which the prince himself liked, is an obvious spare option. His words were hinted. Apparently the demonic king is quite worthless, even if he managed to defeat such an opponent. With a staff in her hands, the girl confessed that she did not reach the level of royal magicians, neither with force or skill, and has already mentioned her stay in captivity. The guilt, if necessary, chase someone to keep this position, has on herself. She wondered what his name was, because she forgot her name again. And the guy nearby stood up and threw that it was simply impossible with her. Even her own name flew from her head. The news that others at least bring more benefits than she was painful for the girl, and immediately a confident answer came. Yes, she knows it. All their verbal duel did not pass the attention of the second witch, which, without interfering, watched the dispute in silent silence. From long men's hair, flickering magical circles were pouring, and a cunning smile played on the mouth. With charm in his voice, he suggested turning these vagrants into powder before meeting with the army. The girl with a strict appearance only sighed and firmly refused. She once thought that she was capable of any witchcraft. But only after starting training, she first doubted her own strength and calling. The images of past battles and a moment of triumph over magic are performed in thoughts. The open eyes glowed with confidence when the look boldly flowed forward. She added something else to this. She left no confidence in her words. It was on her, not on him, that the choice of defeating the king of demons fell. Lightning magic escaped from the outstretched palm of the girl. In the air above her hand appeared one by one magical seals, each of which exceeded the previous size. The outraged magician shouted that it was impossible. With surprise, he demanded explanations. What is this, a huge magic circle? And how in general did Ina manage to like this? The sorcerers surrounded the girl without losing her eyes. At that time, the mighty circle of magic spread just above the sky. Without the shadow of fear in the look, Ain confidently answered the court magician that from now on, any of those like him would not allow Noel to interfere with the affairs. Without delaying the moment, the girl took up magic again. On the street there was a tent with fabric walls and open air instead of the ceiling. There were boxes and a table inside, but there was no living soul nearby. On the threshold, a figure in the glasses suddenly appeared. Lifting the stick up, he exclaimed, demanding to explain what they were doing here. Without a moment, he gave a decisive order to immediately attack. On the contrary, the guy was a real Gershas favorite, dressed in full equipment. On his face, he froze as a surprise when he shouted to the entire hall, asking Prince Schwartz where he said he went. At this point, Prince himself, in stylish glasses, leisurely heading to the table near which a man was already waiting. Going to the table, the prince put one hand on his side, and the other knocked on the tree, saying that it did not matter. He urged everyone to waste time and use the opportunity that appeared. On the opposite side, the question came, what is the opportunity to talk about? Gershas's attempts to convey to the prince an important opinion sounded clearly. They should now go on the offensive, as they will be trapped immediately. They will be the prey of the knight's army and the yard of magicians. Despite the alarming content of such words, the faces of men remained unmoved and calm. The prince barely tilted his head, closed his eyes and smiled smugly. The tips of his fingers easily lifted his glasses on his nose, emphasizing himself. Schwartz announced the attendees that Gödel would no longer return. Gershas's face broke out after the words of the prince. With a look full of surprise, he looked at him at his eyes, trying to clarify the true meaning of heard. Prince Schwartz told the allies the news he was entrusted with Noel Dono. Meanwhile, the hero himself moved forward in the wagon, confidently holding in his hands. He closed his mouth with his palm, yawned long without stopping his way. Behind Noel's cart, who was steadily moving the gorge, the knights of the general walked. They were instructed to stop the hero. However, each of them suffered novel shots, and the full horses, breaking out of their place, were rising forward, leaving the owners far behind. The prince's head flew up, the eyes closed firmly, and his fist faded. I thought he could hold him for a moment, but it seems that fate has prepared a completely different scenario. This person's strength is beyond human ideas. The joy of what witnesses such a spectacle fills his soul, and in his voice ringing a sincere delight. Being constantly admiring the hero, he emphasized that such a lightning and sharp saber can cut anyone who dare to be interfered. The sword is mastered to perfection, bordering on divine skill. For such merits, the hero deserves the honorary title. Even those who usually express skeptical, now silent, catching a special force similar to art. With his arms outstretched, the prince stopped the passage from the tent, confidently assuring that he did not exaggerate at all. Suddenly, a devastating explosion spread in his back, and the sky had fiery tongues of flames. General Gujar, along with Gorzami, raised their heads, trying to grasp the scene. One of them, barely picking up words, was frightened that it was an explosion. On the faces of men, despair and surprise were frozen. The events exceeded the boldest ideas. One of the knights in the armor ran into the tent. He turned to his boss loudly, respectfully calling him sir, and in a hurry to say that the explosion was connected with court magicians. All three instantly turned and stretched their views on the subordinate who had just brought the news. After the explosion, the sky tightened with an impenetrable black smoke, which, like a sinister cloud, was rapidly moving forward. From February, the cry of General Hushard's splashing of saliva flew all over. In an explosive voice, he ordered everyone to immediately break into the royal rooms, and then forced him to hurry, telling to protect every moment, as if the most expensive, his own life. Knights in shining armor were rushing just to the majestic palace like a storm, rolling the battlefield. General Hussar exclaimed them through them, promising to crush the royal palace in a moment. Ahead of all, riders with combat banners who carried an offensive with the determination of the storm. Riding on a horse, General Gudar raced forward at a frantic speed. Shireen swept by him so quickly that only the clubs of dust were left behind. Finally, climbing on his feet, his gaze rushed forward. High hills and harsh mountain peaks rose to the horizon. In the middle of the road, which was between the foot of the mountain and the general, several lonely houses were visible. The smile of joy illuminated the face of a long-haired man when a picturesque tree suddenly opened in the middle of a wild area. It was the place that he needed so. Without hesitation, the traveler decided to stay here for vacation. Sudden noise made anxiety. The body was icy horror, and in the eyes immediately appeared a reflection of incredible fear and stunning. The sudden noise made him turn sharply. It was at this moment that a massive monster, larger than a person, slipped past him. Similar to a wild boar, the creature rushed forward, despite the fact that her body was thickly pierced. The secret force still moved the beast forward without letting stop. Suddenly, a creature, like a boar, looked up and found herself on the ground, sliding a few more steps forward. Her massive body turned, and then with a deaf moaning on her back. General Goodall was stuck, widely opened his eyes. Embarrassment and surprise broke out. What is it? Because of the dense trees, the girl finally appeared. In tense palms, she squeezed the bow, and with the other hand stretched behind her back, to the sagaidak, full of arrows. The girl's gaze was directed forward. She focused so much that she did not pay attention to the general who stood in front of her. General Guadal, stunned and at the same time full of doubt, turns to a girl by name, calling her Sarah. The sound of her name seemed to knock the girl out of the panther. The tension instantly disappears from her face, and she is replaced by a surprise. Extended eyes clearly say she did not expect such an appeal. The rider, clasping her eyes with surprise, shouted to her side, wondering as she could stay alive. The girl hesitantly turned to his direction and tried to say something to the walking. Her hand, stretching behind the arrow behind her back, froze, as if he was chanting in the middle of the movement. The guy yelled, at the same time insisting and pleading, "It is impossible to break the servant's collar so simply. Is there anyone who is able to remove it?" The girl silently watched this scene, clamping her hands nervously. The voltage seemed to reach the peak. A single drop of sweat rolled down on the cheek. An unexpected outbreak of memories seated General Guadal, like a lightning discharge. The eyes were anxious. It finally came. In memory, one of the fresh meetings from Noel in the cart came, and then, the alarming content of the last report. The man's face distorted grimace when he exclaimed with all confidence that he was normal. So Gershas was also near him. His own assumption struck so much that confusion flashed without a word from Sarah. The forehead cut deep wrinkles, and the constant drops of sweat slipped their cheeks. If that's the case, Noel comes from this village. The man laughed. He could not even imagine that the path would lead him to a place where his fate was so closely intertwined with everything. A familiar silhouette, a small village with several modest huts that had already happened to his eyes, was visible. General Goodall's face was immediately distorted by a crazy fury. An unnaturally frozen look-likes, and the mouth stretched in a sinister smile, which only emphasized the wrinkles near the eyes and on the nose. The sudden cry came from his mouth. Taking it hostages. It is quite realistic to destroy Noel. The sword's hand stretched firmly into the palm of hand. The blade easily slipped out of the vagina, and a triumphant laughter blossomed on his mouth. Closing his eyes, he already imagined how he would use all the possibilities of this village, turning it into an impregnable fortress, which would serve as a shelter for future returns. Luke, which was laid in her hands, dazzlingly shining in the rays of the sun, when the girl directed the arrow straight on him and exclaimed, whether he really imagined that she would allow him to do so. To protect Noah and the village he appreciates, the girl raised his bow to his face, targeting the arrow on the man opposite. In her look, determination was read, and confident notes of voice were made by an appeal to the general. Jumping up, the girl released the bow. A lightning arrow rushed directly into the enemy, which became the only incarnation of both the attacker and the opponent. Another silhouette flashed next to her, also rushing to the general. Suddenly, dozens of arrows identical in the air. Like hail, they rushed to the target without losing either speed or pressure. The rider, skillfully saddled the horse, waved his sword in rising motion, reflecting from the arrows, and suddenly a powerful wave exploded in the air. Stroke and confused, the girl watched what was happening around. A shiny drop of sweat appeared on the cheeks. It was not inserted in the head. Her arrows were repelled by a single blow. The look directed forward, the mouth involuntarily spread out of surprise. Gently touching the earth, Sari managed to stand on his feet confidently. The gaze slid sideways. There was a breathless beast with fangs, which she just won. The monster, reminiscent of Nagra, trembled in full real estate summer grass. Running to him, the girl strongly grabbed his front hooves, sharply turned around and easily lifted his body above the ground. Filling in the saddle, General Gaidal watched as a giant carcass of monster was flying to him from the sky. In the air, the carcass rotated, spinned with a powerful throw of Sarah, and approached at incredible speed. A barely noticeable smile played on his mouth when the sword in his hand easily divided in half an obstacle that flew right on him. Without any tension, with expressive confidence, he watched the results of his rapid movement. Blood jets of the monster cut air from a powerful blow. Splashes broke down just in the face of a man. Turning to the girl, he threw. It was only a futile attempt. As soon as the bloody diaper Bora dispelled from sight, a completely different threat appeared to the general. A flock of arrows raced just at him. The distance between them melted every moment, and it was almost impossible to avoid their deadly flight. 2 rapid blows hit the housing of the general horse. An animal, frightened by pain, sharply became stabs, loudly and desperately rust. The general, whitewashing with fear, was convincing his hands into the bridle and screamed, trying to reassure the restless Skaka. Rapidly jumping from a wounded horse, the rider landed on one knee, resting his hand into the ground, and the other squeezed the sword firmly. The horse's neck was a solid bloody mass, and covering his eyes with pain, the noble animal fell down, slamming his head into the ground. Guadal's gaze flew up, and the cry escaped from his mouth, full of pain and surprise. Is it really the custom of this demonic servant? When Sarah squeezed his bow on the shoulders, the fingers of the other hand pulled to the sagedak with arrows. Suddenly the girl was shaking indecision. The look filled with anxiety was frozen in front, and the body said without moving. In the middle of the battle from the overgrown forest, Sonia just ran to them, carrying a basket overflowing with flowers on a curved hand. An excited and confused girl could not tread from what was happening around. The surprise made her throw a dreamy look towards Sarasana and, hesitating, say, "Is it really here?" Sarah shuddered again, opened her eyes wide and opened her mouth with fear, but a word did not break from her mouth. Looking back, the general illuminated himself. A sight that unfolded before him caused a sincere smile on his face. A moment, and the sword hardened in the battles is already squeezing the throat of a suddenly caught dreamer. It is unknown how the uninvited guest was behind her back, ruthlessly resting the cold edge into the fragile skin. General Goodhull glittered with a sinister smile, holding the girl in the hostage. With one hand, he faded into Sonia's shoulder, and the other lifted a long sword to her throat. The man strictly ordered the Sari to throw a bow. If, of course, she does not seek the death of a girlfriend. Sonia's cheeks were burning shy, and their lips were given an excited, fragmentary request to Sarasan. Outwardly, it looked confident, but it was possible to determine its tension only by a trembling voice. On the orders of General Sarah, his fingers slowly squeezed, and the bow easily slipped out of her palm, falling at the girl's feet. In the middle of a small lawn that hid in the shade of dense trees stood the faraway. General Gaidal smiled, many of them point out that, unfortunately, it will still die, so there is no point in worrying. Let him wait with Noel and Hell. Sarah, without holding back emotions, swore, frozen with a confused look in his mouth, holding his breath in anxious expectation. The girl who was held hostage bent her head, plunging into difficult thoughts. What if Nelel-san would return and see this scene? The strong hand of the man did not let her shoulder be released, and his weapon remained fixed directly at her. The smile illuminated the face of a man. A slight laughter escaped from his chest. Turning to an upset girl, he neglected that she should not cherish hope. His gaze spoke more than words. The victory in this confrontation has already been enrolled in him. The girls reported Noel's detention with his own subordinates. In memory, a moment of the hero's carriage surrounded the memory in memory, and Guedel himself, catching his right moment, rushed and disappeared in the haze of lonely escape. Somewhere on the side the words were heard. Someone announced that the find was discovered. From the trees, the figure came out in the cloak. The hood hid his face, not letting see who hid under him. General Goodall sharply turned his head and shouted that he had nothing to do with Noel. In his voice, both objections and an uncertain issue swelled. As soon as a carefree smile faded out of his face, giving way to a place of anxious expression, the events began to really bother him. The man in a long outfit leisurely extended his hand forward, opened his palm, and magical energy began to flow from it. Just before his palm in the air, glowing magical circles flashed one after the other. Sudden movement when Dallas took the sword from the neck of Sanyas and sharply pushed the girl in his back open. In a gust of fear, the prisoner broke into a cry, and her body bent down. A man armed with a sword rapidly rushed at the magician, who remained unbreakable, confidently stretching his palm to the side as he was rushing to him. In the air, a blunt collision was heard with the flash of light. Guidal's blade pierced the magician through, lifting that soulless torso to the edge of the sword. The cheerful winner laughed openly, calling a triumph, calling the magician by an ordinary worthless crowd. Lowering his head, the magician dumped a bloody saliva that ran on his chin. Smile to his ears and crazy laughter filled his face. Turning to Gwanadi, he said sinisterly that he had already had a disaster. Finally, the hood slightly, and the magical face partially opened. One huge eye flashed out of the shadow from which the blood flowed. The cloak was opened in different directions like wings, exposing a blade that pierced the body. Right on its flesh shone, capable of breaking the seal. To her words, she added that she used her sword, which was fixed under the ceiling. The acute blade pierced the middle of the breast, and bizarre magical symbols appeared on the body. The girl suddenly shaken and slowly fell on her back just on the ground. Surprised General Goodall, without holding back the cry, said, "What is it?" Having stretched on the ground, the magician hardly pronounced every word, pausing between phrases. The indignant cry of the general joined her exhausted voice, which promised to change the world. He demanded explanations, though he guessed her intentions. A thin layer of black fog wrapped up a blade that pierced the girl, tightly wrapping the blade and body, like a treacherous snake. Stretching on the ground, the witch was barely audibly squeezed by the words that her place had reached her undeservedly. Only because she was in the army that hunted the king of demons, at all without any abilities. However, even talking about it, she did not hide the smiles, as if life, devoted to the sake of searching for magic, became her true reward. That is why she should release the force capable of turning this unjust world. The black haze became more and more thickening, absorbing the surrounding, like a living darkness. The sword blade flashed a bright light that escaped from the wound on the girl's body. The crazy smile did not come out of her face, despite what was going around. She was going to release the evil god who can be able to expel everything in his crazy impulse. In the air began to be born a monster. Its silhouette was gradually different, reminiscent of human ribs. The muzzle of the monster was terrified. The mouth was open, and it sparkles with many sharp like blades fangs. Determined right in front of the general, a spooky figure was formed. A giant black demon, which in size and ominously impressed with the imagination. The frightened man swayed and fell on his back, crying with horror and confusing the question, "What is happening right now?" The giant monster's tongue slid the boy's face. The demon licked him like a huge dog. The general threw himself with horror and closed his eyes firmly. Enchanted, the guy frozen on the spot, without taking his eyes off the giant saliva flows that fountain poured from the monster's mouth just to the ground. Stuttering in fear, he hardly said the question, "Does she know who he really is?" After all, he was destined to become the owner of this kingdom. A frantic cry escaped from a man, despite the desperate denial of the inevitable. Dies, and has not yet managed to squeeze the crown. The horror, so primitive, distorted his face, like a shadow that squeezes his soul. The desperate exclamation was wide open, and the wrinkles of fear were deepened around the eyes. The huge mouth of the monster spread out, and a long, slippery tongue, which immediately entangled the body of General Goodall, snatched out of its dark depth. At a moment, the gigantic monster's gigantic mouth completely absorbed the man. With the last breath, he slammed the monster jaws and disappeared into the darkness of the viscera, as if it were not. On the ground, stunned by what was seen, sat Sarah and Sonia. Sarah settled a little behind the fair-haired girlfriend, squeezed, as if she were scared. Sonia clamped her palm on her face without drawing a frightened look from what was doing around. The alarming question is in the air. Isn't the attacker? The question unexpectedly came. What is happening here? The huge black monster climbing the hind legs looked like a person. She stretched her claws forward with a scope, spread her mouth, and she covered her darkness that had been cluttered around like a living tentacle. The darkness enveloped the sky, absorbing white clouds and immersing everything around the darkness. Among this impenetrable haze, a cliff emerged, from which the bright light broke out, piercing the earth so sharply, as if lightning had hit the sky. Far ahead, next to the lamb, the girl's figure rose. Her long braid hair played playfully in the wind. Without drawing her eyes, she watched the side of the giant black crater, which she stopped the azure sky. The girl's mouth played a surprised but cheerful smile. Aqua's stamped, trying to ask what it was. To her taste, the spectacle was terrible. Excessive surprise and excitement distorted her face. Her lips shuddered, and her eyes opened to the limit. The hits of the neighboring city were drowned in the darkness that hanged over them. The black sky cut the bright lightning flash. The light spear hit the ground, splitting the darkness. The faces of the passers-by rose up. The eyes were plunging into the sky, where the black crater over the roofs was rapidly expanding. The surprised exclamations were heard around. No one could understand what had happened. Some, not hiding the disgust, were vividly overtaken by impressions. The spectacle seemed just terrible to them. The cattle fell on the ground. The owner who kept the horse on the tether, stunned, watched his animal suddenly glowing down, losing consciousness. Behind the cattle was still, not giving any signs of life. In the hands of the man lay vegetables that faded just over the gas, causing him a genuine surprise. Around, as if on a team, the stems of other plants were immediately dried and faded instantly. A spooky black moo grew behind. Meanwhile, in another place, there was a space that resembled an ancient temple from the inside. Huge windows on the high walls opened a stunning landscape on the night sky, which was slowly gathering in gloomy colors. In the heart of the hall, a massive rod, decorated with an emblem and threatening thorns, stood. The girl wholly her head with clumsy movements, shaking her anxious anticipation. The light wrinkles gathered on her forehead, and a drop of cold sweat rolled on his cheek. A large curly pin gleamed in lush hair. There were a few more people dressed in long black mantles around the girl, who was distinguished by a white dress. Pressing her hand to her chest, the girl initially equated what happened to the disaster of the ominous demon, Lord, but later corrected evil, in her words, even exceeded the power of the demon. With a confident gesture extending her finger forward, the girl urged everyone around the bishops and the highest churchmen immediately. The strict order required instant execution. Hearing this, the men in the black slopes rushed forward, fulfilling the will of the girl without any delay. The alarming girl thought, even if you gather all the sacred servants, the maximum which can be counted to, keep the disaster in one place. It may be worthwhile to seek help from other countries. No, they will not have time. Crying a girl came like a spell, addressed to the goddess with plea to hear her prayer. In her voice, a desperate warning was heard. The ominous deity returned to life. The bright flash instantly distinguished the dark figure of the evil god, exposing its true essence. The girl's prayer responded with a request to give her strength to accomplish the divine blessing. In an instant, a dazzling swirl of light twisted in the center of the hall. Just in the air, the goddess suddenly appeared in front of the girl. He was shining over her head, and the figure seemed to spread in the air. The attraction froze in the fascination, lifting her gaze to the deity, which responded to her prayers. The goddess opened her hands, and the light around her became even brighter. Instead of desired help, she peacefully said that her strength would not be needed here. The goddess remained stationary until the girl's dress unfolded in bizarre directions. Surprised, the girl tried to turn to the woman who stood in front of her, hoping at least to explain something in this incomprehensible situation. The goddess with a radiant nimbus around her head smiled and told the girl that the enemy had already reached out. The girl froze, inseparably looking at the goddess with a look in which it was impossible to read something. It seems that such news stunned her. The black clouds were constantly thickening, tightening the sky with a dark haze. In the middle of the chaos, a sinister god grew. Now his figure has acquired human traits, and straightening on the hind legs, the monster frozen under the light that broke from the depths of the crater. The bright glow grabbed the contours of his body when he dropped his head. He opened his mouth and looked up. Meanwhile, the girls were quietly huddled to each other below, going through anxious moments together. Sarah with anxiety watched as the monster was constantly increasing, gaining even more threatening scale. The suspicion was born inside. Does the evil god absorb all the energy around? The gaze slid on a giant demon, which was staggering in chaos shadows. She understands that the escape could be saved, but the body is not obeyed by any order. Suddenly, the gust of a frantic element lifts a strand of hair, like a banner in the midst of chaos in the center of disaster. Along with her, Salia pressed his fists to her chest, closed her eyes from fear as the wind flew straight into the face, developing golden hair. Thinking that Sandra is perfect for Noel, Sarah decided, at least she should help the girl. The Elfa gently pressed Sandra to herself, wrapped her hands, hid the girl's head on her shoulder, protecting against possible dangers. With anxiety, she looked forward. A man suddenly appeared with the girls. Paying for overweight, he said a few words. The elf, in surprise, slowly rose from the ground without releasing the scared Sanyas. It turned out that Noel arrived for help. He was confident. He held a giant sword in his hands, and his gaze remained calm and firm. No hint of fear or confusion before what was happening. The look of the elves has frozen somewhere in the endless valley. Perfectly outlined lips were involuntarily revealed from surprise, and the eyes did not break away from the hero. The monster's paschachka spread so wide that the appearance of cold inside only. Small and extremely sharp teeth, accurately like a shark, glitter between the jaws. After grinding, the beast moved a long tongue and wrapped up into the sky, and his eyes flashed like small explosions, instantly waving his hands, as if he had caused a whole drain of blows at the same time. The god of evil tilted his head forward, ceasing his earlier look-up. In a moment in the body of the evil god, a powerful explosion was struck. The fragments of the monster flew all the way, leaving only the tail with paws unharmed. One only sweeping stroke of the sword. Noel dissects the evil god. The jaw and eye flew behind the hero's back, mixing with other parts of the enemy's body. Landing on one knee, the blade is firmly compressed in his hand. In the posture of the young man there is no crumb of tension. It seems that it did not cost any effort for him. Finally, the sky was cleansed again. Instead of a thick, dark mew, which hid all the light, familiar fluffy clouds sailed on it. On the meadow, just among the sheep, there was a puzzled Aqua, holding her hands behind her head. The excited view only emphasized the confusion of the girl. She was asked about well-being, however, without hearing. She asked again. The Aqua eyes sewed with surprise when he turned and saw Neil, and then even Sarah and Sonia. The hero blossomed into a confident smile, calmly put his hand on his belt, and threw his eyes at the Aqua. The girls, becoming a boy on the side, supported the same smile, lining up behind his back as if in a sign of unity. After her chin on his palm, Aqua was conceived forward. With an unsolved doubt on the face, the girl shared with the boys her strange anticipation, which did not rest. A wide smile illuminated Noel's face. With his eyes closed, he assured that everything was fine with everyone. At the moment when the castle was attacking, the majestic and inaccessible residence of the royal family stood over everything around. Thick pillars of smoke and dust rising around him, adding even more dramatic to these exciting events. Widely stepping forward, the knight in heavy lads, which fully enveloped his foot with metal, broke into the attack. With his teeth tension, Gershas waved his sword, cutting the soldier's armor opposite, but did not protect the poor from the inevitable wound. Behind, one of the riders in a heavy helmet did not slow down with the answer. A tangible blow fell just into the shoulder. Returning to General Gujar, Guru's ordered to go forward, promising to hold the enemies in place. Immediately received the approving consent from the general. Their views were missed in mutual understanding. Entering the palace, the man strongly dissolved the massive door, feeling behind his back steps of iron carts of knights. Inside, it was greeted by a glow of a spacious cabinet, flooded with bright light. There were two more men on the opposite side of the hall. One of them, squeezing his palm firmly, shouted to general reproach about his dangerous recklessness. Without restraining indignation, he asked if he understood where they got. The other was denied, immersed in reflections and sitting on a chair. General Gusher, following the horizon, noted that if there was a worthy ruler on the throne, no reason for the rebellion would not have appeared. However, everything is different now. The man, along with the soldiers, frozen, without moving out of place, their views are stubbornly forward. Finally, turning to the lord who was on the throne, he solemnly announced, "It is the end," adding a respectful, "Your Majesty." The one who addressed these words squeezed his jaw, and a gloomy expression appeared on his face. Obviously, such a solution was not liked. The general appeared on the balcony of the castle, solemnly lifting his fist to the sky, turning to the crowd under the walls. The loud voice was heard over the entire area, reporting that the struggle was finally completed. In response, People responded with enthusiastic exclamations about the glory of Lebanon, filling the air with a joyful homon. Hands are raised in the air when the crowd sincerely wishes to General Hucker good health and longevity, and Leovenia, happiness and prosperity. The space at the royal castle gates fills a joyful noise. Many people gathered to celebrate a priceless victory together. Sarah with Noel went further to the corridors of the palace. Instead of the usual windows, wide arches stood along the wall, which filled the aisles with warm sunlight. Following the future, Sarah asked in the Newell how the case was moving. The young man said that when the royal family was overthrown, all their sins immediately became the property of publicity. They learned even outside the country. We had to make considerable efforts to convince not only their own people, but also foreign observers. Barely turning towards the girl who was walking behind, the hero noticed that they would not have to avoid, but to undergo an official judicial procedure. Sarah, holding her gaze on the satellite, wondered if the ruler would really retreat. Thinking, the guy touched his fingers to his chin, and answering the girl's questions confessed he has no idea how to explain it. Starting and walking nearby, Sarah looked at Boel and, remembering, explained what had happened to the holy and what her punishment was. The guy shuddered, remembering the steel. Perfectly clean, like the first snow, the corridor stretched forward. Along the walls, the paintings are quietly frozen. At the end, a wide closed gate stretched. Swingfully clutching in the cold metal lattice on the window, the girl with force pulled them on herself, as if she wanted to escape from the trap. Tears and despair were screaming her. How could everything turn into such a horror? Most recently, the crowd celebrated her triumph when they won the final victory over evil. Lush celebrations were preparing, a wedding ceremony with Prince Cain. Didn't everyone sincerely wish her happiness? The door of the Holy Stella room suddenly opened when she kept behind the lattice and looked thoughtfully at the window. A man appeared on the doorstep and asked if she was saying that others were saying. The girl is frozen, absorbed by silence. There was a girl in the room who called the goddess with Noel. Leading her hand on the waist, she stated that all the words that heard around were not greetings, but echo of despair. And Noel just smiled with the edges of his lips, standing nearby. Saint Stella turned into their direction, shouting from surprise and addressing the Holy Queen who lived in Noel. The wonder of her, because the young man who considered the dead was alive. It was stunned on the bed, did not make them a surprised look. At ease, with a face that did not flash the shadows of feelings, the girl notified to others who came to declare her a sentence. Stella froze in place, losing her in herself, and she was stuck, asking the sentence again. Horror and fear frozen on her face with an imperfect mask. The big eyes, which were frozen, did not break away from the interlocutors, and the pale face gave her barely restrained panic. Raising her hands, the girl was outraged. According to the said, the king of the demons himself. Not too picking words, she shouted Noel to confirm her words. He just looked coldly from top to bottom. Some asked if the hero did it all alone. All around them easily dumped their own responsibilities on his shoulders, and now only stood in the middle of the way, hesitation. In the memoirs from the past, Stella, Guadal, and Ina took place in the heart of the magical circle, while the hero remained beyond. The girl frankly confessed it was the order of Gudala. The Holy Queen, slyly smiling, asked if it was true. The question was about participating in a fake related to a real hero. Probably this is the idea of Gudala himself, isn't he? Conveniently resting on the bed, Stella hugged her knees with her hands. The look full of questions, she directed to a holiday that was slowly approaching her. The girl was approaching, stretching her hand just in front of the Stella, and opened her palm at the forehead. From her mouth, a sentence was made. From now on, to consider herself a saint. A grave sin. Stella was alarming. She stared at her palm with horror. The Holy Queen touched her fingers to a black label headed by a girl, and suddenly this spot flashed with a bright light, as if connecting with the skin of Stella, as if a sticker had stuck. The palm squeezed his hands and distrust flashed on her face. A short, surprised exclamation cut a silence. The objection slipped out. The whisper broke out of her mouth. No power of the saint exists. All this belongs only to her. The fingers trembled, and the features of the face distorted the grimace of horror and despair, as if these events had exceeded the most terrible assumptions. The Holy Queen, with a slight movement turned sideways, calmly paired the accusation. These words never belonged to her. The inspiration of the woman drew in the goddess to become a support for the hero. The interlocutor broke out on the face of the interlocutor. These revelations clearly knocked her out of balance. Panic was stuck. Her whole body trembled. Her fingers squeezed her hair. And the look remained empty, directed in the floor. The queen, without stopping on what was said, condemned her. For sin and conspiracy against the goddess will be waiting for the punishment in the metropolitan monastery. Forever. Having mastered the excitement and suppressed the trembling, the girl calmly answered that she knew nothing. Suddenly turning to the guy, Noel shouted loudly. She said with a smile that now everyone will know. "It is he who is the hero of the kingdom, isn't it?" The girl's face was fluttering with a blush. Tears that drawed down to his chin were richly rolled. She shakes his voice, barely whispered about the child she worn under her heart, and added that she could not stand such life. The cam firmly squeezed the edge of the raincoat. The tension appeared even in this gesture. Throwing her head back, clapping her eyelids, she exploded with bitter sobs, begging Noel to save her. The hopelessness and despair that enveloped the girl were stunningly powerful. Without any emotions on his face, the young man calmly said, "If he really seeks change, let him always have the courage to return to their hometown." After holding his hand on his nose, the guy noted, "The village is just reduced. It is quite neglected, and there are very few people here. However, if the desire to start everything from a clean sheet does not leave it, this place, in his opinion, can be a good choice." The girl's cheeks flared up with a fiery blush, and the eyes wide open with surprise gave out a genuine fright. She fell into a cry, denying she didn't want to. "In this village," she claimed, "there is nothing." Squeezing her ears and closing her eyes, the girl exploded again with a bitter cry. She assured with the scream that having settled in this death, she will inevitably turn into a provincial. She will not withstand such humiliation. All the appearance of Stella made it clear that she is still alien to her. The Holy Queen turned to the Stella and became enthusiastically in her direction. Her face flashed with a joyful fire. The girl announced loudly, "Her baby awaits her. She will give him a new life, and with him will learn humanity again." The hero watched this scene silently, without a word. The queen flashed on the face of the queen when she said cold that all her previous words were punishment for her. Her whole figure bent forward, as if under the weight of hopelessness. The palms that were still covered with a confused face were slowly retreating, and the look stuck in the void. The image of the guy emerged in his memory, and the restless thought of the prince did not rest. She wondered with anxiety what was waiting for Prince Cain. It was not hidden from her that he would be sent to the mine where all criminals were being expelled. From now on, no hope for the meeting. Their paths have finally parted. In a disappointing, the girl lifted her head and repeated the royal words in a trembling voice that he was guilty. In the stone corridor of the castle is muted light. Sarah just said that everyone was afraid to hear. That's what happened. For Stella, this story ended sad. The rays of the sun were sliding with ancient walls of a long transition, as if emphasizing the stress that hung in the air. The smile lightened Sarah's face when her gaze stopped on Noel. In her thoughts, she has the joy. Life in the monastery will give her the safety and tranquility necessary for care for the baby, leaving anxiety and fears behind. A sad, sad smile flashed on the lips of the protagonist. Sighs and words filled with consent dissolved in the air. They moved on, and the girl, gently touching his back, gently clapped his palm, giving her support.